I don't want him to do that. I need him. So I'm kidding. What you hear in public? Yeah. I met my targets.
We're at 12:30 hours, so yeah, you can go ahead.
I'm calling this meeting order is 12:30. Right now we have a quorum, -1. It's a good one. Is on its way. And Dr. Finch.
All right.
Let's get started. Thank you.
So if you remember our school board training agenda, what we are accomplishing today is to talk about capital outlay projects and then the funding that goes along with those, okay? And so we're about to do some introductions, but the first ones I want to say, Kurt Ekman. A lot of y'all recognize Kurt because he's been here at our board meetings. We also have Todd Simpson from Parish as well. And Kurt's like a project manager that oversees big projects. He's the one that's overseeing what we have here with the College and Career Academy, freshman campus, stadium renovations, and the field house. So he's the man in charge out there. Todd actually acts as kind of a liaison between Parish and a lot of school districts. Todd is we were former high school principals together. Don't hold it against him, but he used to be the principal at Jackson High School. He progressed through Jackson High School and actually became the superintendent in Butts County. So he was next door. He works for Parish now, and he helps support school systems with capital outlay. He was an expert with it in Butts County, but he's originally from the Carrollton area, and he actually lives in LaGrange right now. So he was smart enough to get out of Jackson. So what we talk about today will blend into what we're going to ask Kurt and Todd to share with y'all today. Then we'll have a break, and then we'll come in on the back end, and we'll have Tom Owens, who a lot of you know Tom. He looks like he's 12. He's not in here right now.
He's been doing it 20 years too, he looks like.
Yeah, he's been doing it forever. Okay, but we also have Alan McCarron, and some of y'all may know Alan. He's a former superintendent in Madison County, and he is retired now, and he supports school districts from the Raymond James side the same way that Todd Simpson supports it from the capital outlay side with Parish Construction.
Started my career in Thomaston too.
Started his career right next door over there in Thomaston Upson School. So a lot of familiarity. These guys know a lot about Monroe County. Kurt actually lives in Perry, and Tom's originally from Milledgeville. I don't know where he's located now. He might be in the Atlanta area. So what I would like for us to do, and I'll start with Alicia, is except for those guys I just identified, if you're remaining in here, tell who you are, what you do for the district, and if you're a board member, say how many years you've been a board member, and if you're currently employed, say what you do. If you're a retired nurse or whatever, just say I'm a retired nurse, okay? We'll start with Alicia.
Good afternoon, my name is Alicia Elder, I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning.
Hey, I'm Priscilla Doster. I'm a board member, have been since January 2018, and I'm retired Assistant Superintendent here.
I'm Laura Rackley, I'm Assistant Superintendent for CTAE and the College and Career Academy CEO, and I am almost 2 weeks in.
I'm Jason Flanders, Assistant Superintendent for Student Services and Operations.
I guess he's already introduced you, Kurt.
I'm following the rules.
And I'm Lance Rackley, Assistant Superintendent for Personnel and Finance, and I've been doing this for about a year and a half.
He already, just
He was outside when we introduced him.
Excuse me. I'm Josh Griffiths, Chief Technology Officer.
Greg Head, Board Chair, own a heating and air conditioning company here locally, and also on the Development Authority, been on the school board here for 6 years.
I'm Robert Jenkins. I'm retired from the Georgia Power plant here. I've been on the school board for a little over 2 years.
I'm Eva Bilderback, I'm vice chair, and this is my 19th year, and I was post-employed for 31 years.
I'm Julie Hoots, I'm a board member, brand new, just sworn in a couple weeks ago, and kind of taking a break from being a nurse, staying at home with kids.
I'm Cherie Battle. I'm a board member. I was a former teacher here in Monroe County for 32 years, and I taught at Al Boris Correctional Center for 10 years.
Well, now that we've gotten the introductions out of the way, what I'll do is I'll drive a lot of the information that you're going to see electronically. This is a work session that we've tried to have scheduled since April of 2024. So we're finally getting to hold it in January of 2025. And a lot of it has to do with because, what we're trying to accomplish depended so much on land acquisition. Now, it wasn't a lot of land. And I'm glad we weren't going after a lot of land, because I hate to see how long it took for there, but what we're going to talk about today hinged on a lot of what happened with the land acquisition matter that was just approved at your last board meeting. And so now this can feed into the 5-year facility plan that we've tried to put together here in our district that can kind of help serve some of our needs. So a lot of you, not a lot of you, but board members in executive session during the land acquisition matter have seen this information. So some of this is going to be reviewed. If you forgot about it, because it happened in a December 2023 meeting, that's why I'm going back to it, okay? And of course, Ms. Hoops wasn't even a part of that at that time. So very important stuff. So some of this is going to joggle your memory, some of it may not. The external folks that we have in here, they've seen this information too, because I had to show them the rationale of why they needed to be here today. And the one thing I need to remind everyone is that board members every year have to have 9 hours of training. Ms. Hoops has to have 15 hours of training. She'll get 9 concurrently with y'all. She's already done 3 with the central office, and then I think you've done 3 with a new board member training in Houston County already?
Yeah, I think it was a little more though.
Okay, it was 6, okay. So you're gonna get covered. You'll easily get your 15, they'll get their 9. This is part of it. Mr. McCannon actually has some sign-in paperwork that he has to accomplish for Raymond James, for them to know that he has been here and can certify the training from their end as well. And we'll go ahead and move straight into this matter right here. What really preempted a lot of this was, you know how much Monroe County is growing. You know how much our facilities are, almost bursting at the seams, and you know how much maintenance and upkeep that we have to catch up on, and you know how much we have to expand. And so, when we first talked about this matter, I told you at that time that I thought we were 4 years behind. after working on it now for the better part of a year and a half, 2 years, I really feel like we're closer to 6 to 7 years behind. But it doesn't mean that, you know, if we wait any longer, we're gonna be worse than that. But, so hopefully today we'll see a little bit of glimpse of what we need to get accomplished. These are our facilities. These are by year built, they're by square footage, and they're by acreage. I'm gonna draw a line right here with my cursor. Everything that you see above here is a facility that's registered with the state, okay? So you actually earn state dollars off of these registered facilities at the state. Some of these buildings used to be registered with the state, like this little facility right here, which is right outside your window behind you. It used to be registered. Now it actually falls up under the Mary Persons High School funding, okay? So every school facility has a code. Every district has a code. Our district code is 702, okay? The code at Mary Persons High School is 0184. And so when the state sees 702-01884, they know that's Monroe County, Mary Persons High School. Every facility is registered at the state. They know exactly how many classrooms we have. They look at our enrollment, and they can determine whether or not we have overcrowding or underutilized space, okay? Now, the years built, that's very important. In the school business, the 20-year threshold and the 40-year threshold are pretty much your little benchmarks for when you start to receive the highest amount of state funding. The 20-year mark is for things like renovation and modification dollars. And the 40-year mark is really about replacement dollars, okay? So at 40 years, you know, the state says it's probably time to replace that building. Now, there's plenty of facilities and buildings in the state that go past the 40-year mark, okay? Maximizing funding is usually around those times, okay? Don't want to steal all the thunder of everybody that's going to be here today, but I do want to lay out a little bit of those tidbits that are going on. And you can see some of these other that are here. The one that I'll point out as well, you know, the William Hubbard Complex, it used to exist as a bigger footprint, but you remember some of that got up underwater, and we had to tear down some of it, we had to renovate some of it. So all of it is not there as the way it was in 1955. MCAC is a former private school in this district called Monroe Academy. It has never been registered with the state. So that means that any facility maintenance, upkeep, renovation, build out, anything we do over there is all 100% local money, unfunded by any support from the state, okay? This has never been a registered state number in the whole thing. All right, moving quite along. This is the enrollment as of December. And the ones I want to highlight to you are the ones at the high school and the middle school, okay? This is where we are experiencing the most overcrowding. And if I had to rank them, I'd say the middle school, and then I would say the high school. The easiest piece about Mary Persons High School was not built to have 1,323 kids. When Mary Persons High School was built, back in 1983, it was built to house about 750, 800 kids. There you go. So, to alleviate some of that in 2007, Monroe County Schools repurposed this facility that's behind you because 9 through 12 could not exist at Mary Persons High School anymore. This over here bought us some time, okay? It's been open for 18 years now. This is the 18th year that we've utilized the 9th grade campus concept, okay? And we're going to continue to utilize that, obviously, with the newest facility that we're building now, okay? Now, Monroe County Middle School, when I first got here in 2007, and some of you will remember this, we used to have 2 middle schools, okay? It used to be 1, then it split into 2 during Mr. Cowan's term here. One of them was called William Hubbard Middle School, one of them was called Banks Stevens. When the matters were going on with the facility issues that were going on at Hubbard Middle, the moisture levels, the molding levels, we had to take all of the students in middle school age and put them up under one roof. Now, we didn't have enough room at the Banks Stevens campus, so you remember we grade banded them all 6 through 8, but we set apart the 6th graders over at the William Hubbard campus, and we had a 6th grade campus that mimicked what we did right here as the 9th grade campus. Okay, I'm just trying to fill in some gaps here. Over time, We added more classrooms to the Bank Stevens campus, okay? And Parrish actually did that project as well, 14 classrooms. It was designed to address a classroom shortage and overcrowding. At the time the plans were approved, we were +7 at the state level. +7 means you have 7 more classrooms than you really need for kids, which is a good thing. Though a lot of schools don't operate that way anyway. Most of them operate either at 0 and the negative. By the time Parrish completed the construction and we opened and went in there, we were already back down to 0. Because that's how many people were matriculating up through our grade levels or moving into our district, okay? So needless to say, all that planning, building, and whatever really got us right back to 0. But I can't imagine what we would be doing if we did not have those extra 14 classrooms, okay? So, the other growth in the area, like T.G. Scott used to be almost at 1,000, so it's actually less than what it's been in the past. KB Sutton has experienced the most growth in the last year. 2 years ago, Hubbard Elementary saw the most growth. And when I say most growth, they grew about 11% 2 years ago. These guys right here have grown about 8% this year. T.G. Scott has started to level off, okay? But I will point out that we have over 4,700 kids in the district now, whereas just 5 years ago we had 4,152. Okay, so we're almost 600 more kids. And that's gone in a different direction than a lot of the other public school districts who have lost enrollment because there's so many different avenues now to a high school diploma. Okay, so a lot of school districts have gone to lesser enrollment. Monroe County, people are moving in here, folks. Okay, they just are, and I don't have to tell you that. You know that. All right. So a little bit of a history lesson here. If you remember, there was some land here where the Fine Arts Center sits, okay, that was not ours. We were trying to buy it, couldn't get a transaction on that. In fact, Ms. Bilderback's probably the only board member that was remaining from that transaction, but we went through a land swap with two other citizens, okay, and this is what the Board of Education ended up getting, okay? So, the land for the Fine Arts Center, the land for the College Career Academy and the freshman campus, and then approximately 70 some odd acres right here directly behind the main campus, okay? That all went along in a land swap. That probably happened around, Ben Bone might have to remind me, but it was about 2014, because we opened up the Fine Arts Center in 2016. I don't know when it finally got finalized, but I was still at the high school when all of that went on, okay? So, been holding on to this land for quite a while. The Fine Arts Center opened in December of 2016, so it just completed its 8th full year, and it's in its 9th year of existence, the Fine Arts Center is, okay? Hard to believe it. All right. So since that time, though, this land right here has been sitting dormant until last spring when we started breaking ground right here, and then this still sits here, okay? All right, so part of my discussions with central office and even with people like Roger Arnscott, even while I was still at Mary Persons High School, is what's the plan for the use of this land? Is there a reason why we would have 70+ acres and not ever use it? And, you know, there was talk about what it could be, you know, the potential and all this other kind of stuff. Some of the reasons I was told we couldn't use it is because it's too hilly, it's got some ravines, it's got some creeks, it's got this, it's got that and other. In July of 2023, I met with Roger and I said, Roger, I need to know, just from my own personal knowledge, is how much of that land is usable. And I need to make sure that it's usable, because if it's usable, we need to put it to use. And if it's not usable, you know, of course, my question is, why would we ever acquire land that's not usable? But, of course, all of that's been done in the past. There's no reason to bat around those questions or anything. But we got the engineers to get us a topography map. And what we were able to determine is, it's not 77 plus or minus acres, it's actually 70.71 acres, of which there's a creek in there that covers almost 16 acres. And then there's total usable amount of acres in this lot right here is 54.77. Of course, my mind is sitting there thinking, well, you know, one of our biggest acreage lots is at the high school, and it's 42 acres, so feeling pretty good about the number of acreage land that we have right here that is usable, okay? So that was good news that we got back from the engineers, and that was probably somewhere around August 2023, September 2023. Of course, that's the time where we were starting up school, but it got us to kind of think, you know, well, if this is that lot right there, that's without all the topography on it. If this is that lot, and this is the current main campus right here, and we already own that, what is this right here? Because this right here is buffering that, and all this up here from all being able to touch itself. All of the Board of Education property being able to touch itself. These are the only two lots of land right here that are separating all of our land being contiguous, okay? So, started researching. Of course, you know, this was purchased by the board probably around 2009, 2010, and that's the former Monroe Academy land there. And you can see all the markings of what a school would have. You know, you've got athletic fields and whatnot. Currently, we have our alternative school there. We have Central Georgia Tech that comes in there at night for adult education and GED type education. We also have Central Georgia Tech coming in there during the daytime to serve some of our third year pathway completing nursing students who are getting what's called a CNA, okay? The other entity that is out there is JROTC, okay? ROTC will be moving into the new College and Career Academy, a portion over there. So we've got some use out of this. We actually have a little bit of athletic use out of this. You'll see soccer teams that'll show up and do practice over there. We've got some basketball teams somewhere in the district that'll practice over there. And we have middle school football that'll practice there on the football field, okay? But again, it goes back to these two lots right here when we started investigating them. They were owned by Virginia and Howard Wilcox. And this is when we asked the board in 2023, what I've just shown you on all these slides, is it worth going and asking them, could we purchase your land in order for all of our land to connect? The board authorized me as a superintendent and Ben Vaughn as board attorney to be able to go and manage that transaction. And that's when we started doing that. We started investigating, okay, what's the possibility of maybe a land purchase here? So we went through the tax assessor's page, looked through all that. I won't click on that and bore you for any of that. But I will change your perspective a little bit. From here, you're looking back the other direction now instead of a total bird's eye view that's looking more towards 41. You're actually on top of the old MA campus. You're on the where the football, baseball field is, and you're looking back towards the owned lot that the Board of Education has. But you're also looking at, this is a whole lot that was owned by the Wilcoxes, and this is a portion of it. Now again, we've got our engineers to go through there and say, what's the minimum amount of property that we could purchase to be able to connect them and run some type of causeway, bridge, road, whatever you want to call it, if we wanted to build a school back there. And this is what we were given, okay? And this is why we went and tried to get this amount of acreage. Now, it's only 0.91 acres, and we paid $50,000 for that. It closed last Monday. Board approved it on Tuesday night, last Tuesday night, okay, a week ago. So, the purpose for doing all of that is some of these points of emphasis, which I'm fixing to go over, was one, we wanted to be able to capitalize on land that we already owned in order to address overcrowding. And based on the sentiment that I got from our board was that we really didn't want to entertain purchasing any more money, or purchasing any more land, using any more money to do that, if we were already sitting on land that could possibly be used, okay? We also would like to capitalize on the highest possible of state reimbursement money. If you'll go back to that list in your mind of what I showed you on the facilities and the year they were built, currently the ones that we have registered with the state right now, Mary Purchase High School earns the highest amount of reimbursement because it's the oldest facility and it's housing more kids than it was really built for, okay? But the other thing we have to address is there's an overcrowding issue at a facility that we've recently expanded, and that's at the middle school. And that crowding at the middle school helps contribute to traffic concerns that are on Thornton Road in the morning and in the afternoon. Now, Don Carter, our engineer, and Kim Stokes, the road superintendent, and I met about 10 or 12 months ago, and we talked about doing a road study at Thornton Road, and the data was very heavy in the morning and in the evening, but the traffic dissipates so much on Thornton Road when school's not in session, either on weekends or at nights or even during the school day, that it drops the data points of how many folks are actually on that road. In fact, it drops the data points so far that it doesn't suggest that they need to expand Thornton Road. So it has very intense times of overcrowding and the traffic, but it has times where you could probably go lay down in the middle of the road at Thornton and not ever get hit for a long time, okay? So the only data points that we got back that supported any type of expansion was on the bottom end of Thornton Road where it hits Montpelier and maybe some turn lanes. A turn lane to get on Thornton Road from Montpelier. A turn lane to get off of Thornton Road onto Montpelier. That was it, okay? So we didn't get any relief there. And the other thing we liked was, you know, all of our campus property touching each other over here, being contiguous with each other, going all the way from a Montpelier entrance and a Highway 41 entrance and whatnot. Okay, those are some points of emphasis. Now, let's talk about what facility expansion, capital outlay could look like as it relates to where do you put students throughout the buildings, okay? And when we come with things, I like to come with a couple of options instead of just one set option, okay? Option one. Grade banding. The way you grade band students into certain facilities. Option one is not a very traditional grade banding, okay? It's a little more out of the box. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not as normal as what you've seen from district to district to district. And usually whenever you see this type of grade banding, oftentimes it's not a permanent grade band. Sometimes it's a temporary type grade band. And I'll explain what I mean by temporary. But an option that we could choose to do to help alleviate overcrowding is take all the fifth graders out of every elementary school, okay? And put them in at the Bank Stevens campus on Thornton Road with the sixth grade. So you'd have 2 grade levels in that building instead of 3, which is what's currently in there right now, okay? So all of the county's 5th and 6th graders would be in there. Approximately 700 students. We're looking at between 350 and 400 kids per cohort right now, okay? So if you put 2 cohorts in there, about 750, 800 kids, okay? At the Bank Stevens campus, okay? The other thing it does is it takes a grade level out of each of the elementary schools, which is sitting somewhere between, like at KB Sutton, it'll be 135 to 150 kids, okay? Well, actually, that's more like T.G. Scott. At KB Sutton, it'll probably be somewhere around 110 to maybe 130 kids in a cohort there. But again, when you take them out of if you take all the fifth graders out of those three, you're gonna come up with about 350, 400 kids, okay? Again, if you coupled it with the other cohort of the sixth grade, you're gonna see somewhere around 700, 750, maybe 800 kids if we start growing any more than that. The biggest cohort we've ever had, folks, is sitting right over there right now. It's 400. Okay? That's the biggest we've had, ever. Okay? Not just in my time, but before my time as well. There's never been a cohort of students that has come to Mary Parsons High School at 400. Okay? Elementary schools would not be pre-K through 5, it would be pre-K through 4. Then you would grade band the 7th and 8th grade to what is currently the main campus, the 1983 building. Of course, there'd have to be some facility upkeep done with that as well. The 9th grade would be going into this new facility that's scheduled to open in August. And then we would plan for a new main campus for right here on the 54 acre. So 10, 11, and 12 right here. Okay, 7 and 8 right there. So right now we have approximately about 3.5 grade levels right here. And when I say 3.5, some of the 9th grade has to spill over onto the main campus at times throughout the day. They take electives, they take CTAE courses, they take athletic courses, they take fine arts courses down there, okay? So to say that there's only 3 grade levels in this building is probably not accurate. It's probably more like 3.5. But you can't say you got 4 in there either. Might even be about 3.25, 3.25, okay? So that's option 1. Anybody got questions about that?
So would the, when the new 9th grade academy gets in place, will they still have to go up to the high school part?
They still would have to go there and get some coursework done, because you wouldn't teach chorus at the 9th grade. They do have a CTAE course on the 9th grade campuses called Business Ed, so they can take the first couple of courses in Business Ed. But moving it over there means we don't have to put them on a bus anymore. They can walk back and forth now. Now, eventually what you'd like to see option 1 turn into is, ever how long this takes, I don't know. And this can't happen overnight now. You understand what I'm saying? It's not like we're fixing to approve this at a board meeting, and that's fixing to start in August. That can't happen, okay? Obviously, because Santa Claus can't come up and just drop this thing off right now. You know what I'm saying? That takes a lot of planning and stuff. But eventually, what you'd like to be able to do is take all of these students right here, disperse them back into their elementary schools, okay? And then let the main campus be one middle school, and put 6, 7, 8 in that one, and let the Bank Stevens campus be a whole separate middle school. So you go back to having a 2 middle school concept. Wouldn't have to come up with any other new names. That could go back to being William Hubbard Middle School right there. This could go back to being Bank Stevens High School, especially since the state office still has a record of those names being used into this district. And you go back to a 2 middle school concept. Okay?
Did you say Bank Stevens High School?
Bank Stevens Middle School. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
I have a question. On the 7th and 8th grade campus at Bank Stevens now, they have, you know.
That's really a 6, 7, and 8 grade
Yeah.
campus
6, 7,
at Monroe County
grade.
Middle.
Well, will they still have the same courses, like their exploratory courses at Mary Parsons and that campus as well? So that'll mean hiring more teachers.
That would have more staff. It would have more leadership as well.
Okay.
So it would require financial commitment on that personnel side. And then when you move to 2 separate middle schools, it's going to get even more expensive. Okay? Part of option 1. Okay? All right. Option 2, which gets expensive faster. Ready?
start at the most expensive and work your way down.
Yeah.
Well, all this one is you still build the 10 through 12 campus, okay? But go ahead and split the district into 2 middle schools and make the main campus a middle school. Let the Bank Stevens campus, the current Monroe County Middle School, serve as the second one. Go ahead and do it right now. Don't do the out-of-the-box grade banding that I talked about in option 1. Option 1 kind of buys you some time. It's a slower financial commitment. This would be a faster financial commitment, okay? And it would be harder to accomplish this as facilities-wise.
Are the elementary schools not go out for open sales?
And it'll also accelerate the need for an elementary school. So what this does, what option 1 does, okay, option 1 alleviates crowding at every school facility, okay? Okay, you help out the elementary schools with this. You help out the middle school with this. You help out the middle school with this. You help out the high school with this. You help out the high school with this. Now, lost in all of that is relocating MCAC. You can still repurpose this building for an alternative school. In fact, they've been there before, from what I'm told. Okay? They were there before I was there. When I got here, they were in this building up here. Okay? So you could have everybody there. Now, the only other thing that I'll say is that if we get slowed down in all of this and we start running out of, well, not start running out of room, you know, we're running out of room at the middle school. There's 2 things you can do at the middle school, folks. You can either load in the modular classrooms, the trailers, and put them in the back of that, where that parking lot is. Start putting them in.
We've done that before. We don't.
And people don't like doing that. I don't suggest that, okay? Or you can extract one of those cohorts, either the 6th grade or the 8th grade, and put them in that building right there. Okay? Now that's a short-term fix for a right now overcrowding issue, is to use this building right here. Long-term, you'd really much rather see this being used maybe by alternative education, special education, things like that, because our special education department is right up here in this building. It could easily serve all on one campus right here. So, again, this is a little bit more out of the box, and this right here would, you'd have a surplus of facility space for a while, people, okay? Meaning, you'd have, I'm not gonna say more room than you need, because it ain't gonna be that, okay? You're not gonna have more room than you need, but you're gonna have more room, you're not all on top of each other. You're not gonna be as crowded through option 1. Plus, it's not the most expensive, the fastest. But eventually now, you're gonna have to move back to a 2 middle school concept. And you'd much rather move through this option where you build on land that you already own, replacing a building that has the highest amount of replacement value with the state. And then if you go back to a 2 middle school concept, at least you're going back into facilities that are already built. And you don't have to use new construction or new land acquisition in order to get that done. So we feel like that what we've shown and put together right here maximizes our space, maximizes the land that we already own, and maximizes the amount of state funding that we can get back.
This would keep you from having to district for a middle school.
It would keep you from having to ditch, because when you go back to the 2 middle schools,
You gotta wait to
you
divide.
can't just go back to the old district lines that we used to have, because homes have changed their locations, and the population has shifted a little bit different in the districts, okay? In the district. But if you remember, when I first got here, there was one split. And so on one side, everybody went to Hubbard Elementary, Hubbard Middle, and on the other side, everybody went to T.G. Scott and Bank Stevens. Now, whether you know this or not, the old Scott Cowart 5-year facility plan had in its plan that every elementary school would have its associated middle school. Some of you may or may not remember that.
That's the old.
That was it was probably older than Scott Cowart. Okay, the only reason I call it Scott is because Scott was part of the KB Sutton land acquisition purchase. And when they purchased the land, Roger, correct me if I'm wrong, when they purchased the land for KB Sutton Elementary, they purchased enough, Eagle was here, they purchased enough to where you could build a middle school out there beside KB Sutton Elementary. Okay? So, you were supposed to have Hubbard Elementary with its middle school, T.G. Scott with its middle school, KB Sutton with its middle school. Great Recession hit, okay? Hubbard Middle School went underwater, basically, and things had to change, okay? Things had to change. So, Great Recession, change in facilities, and so it was abandoned that we would build an elementary school and its associated middle school. We went back to the one middle school concept. But folks, we're not probably, I mean, if we split it into two different middle schools right now, there'd be 500 in each one of them, basically, okay? And when I showed up here and we had two middle schools, we were sitting at about 400 in each one of them. So we would actually be sitting with more students in each middle school. If we waved a magic wand and had two today, we would have more students sitting in the two middle schools than there were sitting in there in 2007 when I first arrived. Okay? All right. Just some of these notes. Just going to throw them out there because we really need to get into Parrish and Raymond James here. But like we said, option 1 does this, option 2 does that. Current 9th grade campus could always be repurposed, just like I said. Okay. Some other things that I just want to keep, these are not very important things that I'm throwing out here, but I want people to understand, our community to understand, our board to understand, internal, external folks to understand, that we have some things that have been working with us. And you know how facility ideas and expansion and capital outlay go, there's always a rank of priority on that. And things kind of move and change, and sometimes they come off the priority list, sometimes they move up, sometimes they move down, okay? But at some point, we've got to talk about how would you like to see MCAC campus, the current one right now, be repurposed, okay? You turn it into campus space for where, you know, we may see a new 10, 11, and 12 facility get used, where you have sidewalks, landscape, lighting, campus branding all through there, okay? Would you like for it to still continue to serve athletics, where you might have parks, an area for a park, where you might have two mobile, you might see these in neighborhoods, where you might have two mobile soccer goals or something like that, or picnic tables, or other types of lighting, or can still continue to practice soccer in a place like that, or have walking paths, or, you know, with that type of property over there, you might even could build a cross-country path. Everybody knows where we run cross-country, don't you? We run it over there where the rec department is, okay? Well, if the engineer and everybody that does all the planning, construction folks look at that property and says, well, you could put a high school right here, and you probably could put a walking trail and a cross-country competitive trail. I know our folks would much rather run over here than have to go over there to the rec center. Okay. The other thing is JROTC training. You know, our ROTC folks have worked very hard about putting together some stuff over there on the MCAC campus, like a little obstacle course and that type of stuff. They're going to lose that when they come over here. Not really lose it, but it's not going to be as successful. They're going to get on a bus to go do their PT and obstacle course stuff over at the MCAC campus. Okay? The other thing is that I don't know all of the deed history on MCAC's campus, I'll be honest with you.
You know it was a dairy.
I don't know it was a dairy.
It was a dairy. The
Okay.
first building there was a dairy.
So we would have to research, you know, when things go in for educational purpose, the people that own that land may have it written in the deed that it's always got to be educational purpose, or it can't change for this purpose, or it can't look like this, or it reverts back to the original owner. So we don't know, I don't know a lot about that deed. I'd have to get with Ben and properly advise, okay? But we still have some other things on the horizon. You may or may not know this, but we have a field house at our soccer complex that actually serves as a dual purpose field house. So in the fall, it serves softball, and in the spring, it serves soccer. Now, if you could wave a magic wand for them, you know those programs want their own soccer field house or softball field house, okay? So we've done a little bit of work in there in the last probably 8 months anyway, trying to fix up some of the stuff. But at the end of the day, the softball folks got to move out, and the soccer folks got to move in, and we keep doing this, oscillating back and forth every year for fall semester. I would like to see us come good on some stuff that we've talked about in the past with some of our athletic personnel about building a softball field house out there. And when I say out there, you know, a lot of schools don't build facilities the way we've built them in Monroe County. I don't say that from a critical point of view. I'm just saying that when you build a football field, you build it with a track around it, okay? You build it with soccer lines on it, and you can play lacrosse on that thing, you can do girls flag football on that. And again, I'm not saying this from a point of criticism, but that stadium really only can do about one thing, and that's play football in it, okay? Now, it does do girls flag football, and it'll do graduation. But school districts don't usually build them like that.
But when it was built, they didn't have soccer.
I understand that. Now, on the other side, so it seems that I'm not being so critical. A lot of other school districts don't have a soccer field like we have. They have to share it with someone. So we're very fortunate on that end. But again, the point I'm trying to get at is, it ain't a one-stop shop. You know, you got soccer over here, you got baseball over here, you got football over here, okay? You got cross-country all the way up across the interstate. And, you know, I would like to see us get as cohesive as we can with a lot of our activities without being so spread out. I know we won't ever totally accomplish it. I would never say, let's change the stadium location. Even if I felt it in my heart, I'm not ever going to say it, okay? I don't feel it in my heart, but even if I did, I would never make that suggestion, okay? Ever. So,
Yeah, that's right. Schools.
But there's some baseball improvements. We've made some, but I'd like to see us make more. And then our wrestling space, folks. Anybody know where our wrestling space is? One is wherever they can find a space, but we hosted yesterday, folks, okay? We hosted an area dual tournament, and we did it in our gym here on the main campus. But do you know how hard it is to transport mats? Because you can't come in on the back side because you're almost in that creek. So you have to come in on the front side, or you have to go in on the CTAE side, and then you're battling with varsity basketball, junior varsity basketball, 9th grade basketball. And you know what basketball is dual gender, okay? So you might be talking about 3, but you're really talking about 6 because there's a girls team and a boys team to every one of those, okay? And so a lot of times our wrestling has to be at the Hubbard, the old Hubbard Middle School gym. Now, we're fortunate to have that facility space, but do you know how hard it is for a visiting team to find where we do our wrestling? And then the parents to find it? So, you know, in a perfect world, I'd like to see us do something with wrestling improvements from there. So,
Okay. Have you thought of, what about the cheerleading? Really need like a multi-purpose building. So, I mean, as good as cheerleading's been,
And they've got them just walking around.
yeah, they rock it pretty well. I mean, wrestling has too, but those are two that I'd say, yeah, definitely needs some improvement. You're right.
yeah, and
And track and field too.
track, well, I don't know if we're ever gonna be able to solve that one, because we've got a 6-lane track on landlocked field over there. Again, nobody ever builds 6-lane tracks because they don't run track. They run track in heats of 2, and not multiples of 2, powers of 2, okay, not multiples of 2, okay, so it's 2 squared, 2 cubed, 2 to the 4th, okay, that's how they run their heats, okay, so it's 2, 4, 8, and 16.
I agree that can be done.
You know, so there's still a lot more opportunity. Even the ones that I've listed, there's still a lot more opportunity. Okay. All right, we have finally gotten to the point where my main man, Todd Simpson and Kurt Edmund. All right. Now listen. Let me show you something real quickly here. Our 5-year facilities plan is in a spreadsheet. Here, right here. It's in a spreadsheet that was helped develop by internal personnel along with Parish. Now let me tell you when this started. The minute that we found out that we had 54 usable acres, I remember the board, when I was first hired, the board said, we want to see a master plan. And I think it came out of Mr. Head's mouth, that we were building here, building there, small project here. We needed to have a plan together. I didn't mishear that, right? So we started working on that once we hit the ground running. I did not know it at the time that we hired Parrish, but Todd and I crossed paths at some meeting or something, and Todd said, now you know one of the services that Parrish offers when you hire them as a construction management firm is free of charge. And y'all know how I am. We pay for it somewhere. We pay for it somewhere, but
It's okay.
they did us a solid. Because let me tell you what they did. Okay? And when I say they, I'm talking about Todd and Kirk walked with me, Lance, Jay, and Roger through every square inch, not square foot, every square inch of this district. In it, outside of it, and on top of it. Okay? And then they took all the notes. All of this information came back to us from Todd and Kirk. But they built it based on our conversations and what they heard. Now, what you have in your hand right here is also, we did not pay for this. Okay? This is something that they do for us because they have a project with us. But everything that's in this 5-year facility plan that we put together in this document, everything that you see down here, okay, is in here. And at that point, I'll turn it over to Kirk and I'll turn it over to Todd.
I mean, you're doing a pretty good job down there, Jim.
I just had to set the stage.
Yeah, what you have in front of you is a long-range plan that we have put together based off all the information that Jim has shared with you guys. They've given us direction of what they wanted to end this plan, and then the next step for that, we went to all the facilities, we looked at all the facilities, we talked to all your staff, we talked to Roger and his staff. I want to make sure that we identified all the needs of the district in every facility and be as detailed as we could. Not only looking at, the state of the carpet or HVAC or door hardware or those kind of things, we wanted to look and see the capacity of each facility to make sure that when you're planning each facility be set up for growth for the future. So, as he said, it is a free of charge service. However, this does not lock you guys into using Parish for any of this work. Would we like to do it? Absolutely. But we know we got to compete for it. So, and that's what we do on a daily basis. We compete. There's 3 things that really go into the plan from my perspective. Todd may add some to it. Is there's 3 things. It's looking at the health of your facilities. It's looking at the population of your, or capacity of your facilities. And it's also looking at your state entitlement piece. We don't want to lose sight of the state entitlement. With that information, we compile all that information, and that helps us develop a long-range plan and set a roadmap, which is included in this book, of how you're going to be successful to achieve this plan over a long period of time. That make sense? So with that being said, I'm going to turn, Todd's the master of this plan, the facility planning. I'm going to turn it over to him to go through the actual plan with you guys.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kurt. Couple of things. I'll start with the outline of priorities that you see at the front of the book. And those were the priorities that were identified by the district when we started this project. And this work began, gosh, over a year ago, right?
It started in October of 2023.
Yeah, October. And so we wanted to begin with a set of priorities that would sort of guide our thinking. And ultimately, we want we want this work to model the thinking of the district. And then if the district's thinking changes, we can change the model. The other thing that we want to do, as Dr. Finch mentioned, we want to stay in rhythm with the DOE guidelines for managing capital outlay. And what I mean to that rhythm is, once a building reaches 10 years old, you begin earning some capital outlay dollars for things like HVAC, a lot of your mechanics. Your roofs, can be replaced at 20 years, and renovations happen at 20 years. And those are critical points in the life of a facility, because you do begin to maximize your capital outlay entitlement dollars from the state. But also that 40-year mark is a critical mark, because you have another option at 40 years. You have several options at 40 years. Once a building gets to be 40 years old, you're trying to decide whether you want to replace that facility or whether you would want to modernize that facility. And you will see as we go through here, you have some facilities that they have celebrated their 40th birthday. And so when you make a decision about building a new facility, the state will fund that somewhere, depending on the level, between $80 and $84 a square foot. Whereas if you make a decision to modernize, they will fund that modernization effort at about $60. Renovations are funded based on your earned instructional units. So you earn $14,000 per earned instructional unit, meaning you have enough students to earn X amount of instructional units, and they fund the renovation at $14,000 per earned unit. So the modernization earnings are higher than renovation, but new construction is higher than modernization. And so once you make a decision, say, to modernize a facility, that building, you need to be happy with it for another 20 years, because the state will not participate really beyond that, because once you get to 60 years, you start running the risk of some issues with the facility at that point. What I will say about your current facilities is, and I have the greatest retirement job there is. I get to go all over the state and do this for school districts, and it's a lot of fun to do, and I love being in school buildings and looking at different facilities throughout the state. Your buildings have been carefully cared for. I mean, they're clean. I mean, you walk into your schools and you can tell that there's an awful lot of people that care. It's not as though your facilities haven't been well cared for. I mean, they're in good shape for the age that they are, but you have some critical decisions to make, coming up.
Not totally dilapidated then, huh?
No, sir. And the first one that, we would look at behind the budget summary is like Hubbard. It's tab 2. So that building will be approaching its 40th birthday, as you see there, in 2033. In that's a decision to make about that modernization piece. If you walk through Hubbard, again, it's a clean building, it's been cared for, but there is a roof, there's some roof issues there, there's some drainage issues there, and what I would say is that, as Kurt chime in too, when you consider some of the most important things you can do to be careful stewards of the resources that taxpayers are providing you, is make sure you have a good roof, make sure that you have good HVAC equipment that's maintaining proper ventilation, that you don't end up with, you know, some of the problems associated with poor ventilation and maintaining that. Also, the other thing is drainage. You want to make sure that you don't have any drainage issues, because that can create a lot of expensive issues and structural issues.
Yeah, with that being said, it's all about the envelope of the building, really. If you think about it, if you can keep the water and the moisture out, and you can take care of everything else inside relatively easy, and it lasts longer. So
Yeah.
those tend to be the priorities, is the envelope.
And so, based upon the condition of that building, I think the wise thing to do is to make that decision, say to modernize that building once it approaches its 40th birthday. But at the same time, the roof, HVAC, drainage, those kind of things probably need to be addressed, and you'll see that reflected in that.
All right, so in our electronic document here, which is, what you're looking at is the same thing that we keep in a Google sheet, okay? Remember, we had to extract out the Hubbard roof project because it was taking so long for the land acquisition to close down that we had to pull this one kind of out. It's not really pulling it out, it's just accelerating it because we could never have this meeting here. In a perfect world, we would have had this meeting back in April, and we would have started the RFP, RFQ process for the Hubbard roof in like May. Now, we do have the RFP, RFQ advertised for right now, and so companies know that that project is out there, and we've approved that process to go forward, and we haven't even collected all that stuff in yet. But what Todd's talking about is you already are executing some of this 5-year plan already, is my point to you.
Right.
Okay.
That's right. And let me say this too about the budgets that we have in here. Please don't consider these budgets to be like, this is Parish Construction's best and final offer for a budget. Basically, when we're doing facility planning, what we're basing that on is just an average cost per square foot that we're seeing across the market in a given time. So our pre-construction team builds a database for me, and we update it about every 6 months of what we're seeing things cost, you know, on average by square foot. So it's not as detailed of a budget. When you begin a project, as Kurt will attest to, you know, we're going to run several budgets, you know, all the way through the process leading up to construction. And we're going to, you know, bid that work in a competitive market and get you the best price. That's not reflective of what these budgets are about. At this point, with regard to facility planning, we just want to use numbers that we're currently seeing in the market and try to give you like worst case scenario. So as you will notice that we build in some inflation in the budget. We hope that inflation number that we're inserting in there is way high. I mean, we hope that we've overshot there. We would much rather put a higher number down now and work towards, as we get closer to like a bid day, getting that number down if we can. That's very important to us to do that. We include things oftentimes in there like emerging technology, like between now and when you may execute a project, there might be something that comes out that hits the market that has evolved maybe over a few years that you might want to include. And so we go ahead and include that in this budget very, very early. So it's a high level estimate just based on what we're seeing in the market at the time. And as you progress through this plan, again, the priorities or the outline of priorities at the beginning guided us, but also trying to stay in rhythm with when your buildings are hitting those 20-year 40-year marks. And here's the other thing that I would say is that while I have not done a demographic study here, which we do oftentimes include that when we do facility planning, the growth that you are seeing, as Dr. Finch indicated, is exceptional. When you consider, as he mentioned, the multitude of options that are available for families, but also another very important factor is that factors into why many districts aren't growing is the fact of the matter is the birth rate is declining. Families are having children later and they're having fewer of them, and most districts are seeing. So for you to be seeing the types of increases that you're seeing is exceptional. I mean, it's
But I have two questions.
Yes.
On this cover sheet, on the right-hand column, you got state amount and then total state amount.
Yes.
That's off by one number. Should be 152
Okay.
for the total.
Okay.
And that
I
makes
think
it
what
add up right.
What Excel does is it
Right, right.
rounds.
But my other question is, on the 5-year inflation factor, you say 30%,
Yes, ma'am.
but that number is actually 10%.
Okay,
Of
we'll
the
take a
total.
look at it.
If you look up there, the total construction budget, and what you've got here for the inflation factor is actually 10%.
Okay. Yes, ma'am, we'll take a look at that.
What does FF&E stand for below the 5-year inflation factor? Was that?
Fixtures, furniture, and equipment.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
5 years.
2 years construction, not 5 years. I got you.
You just put the sort of
Yeah.
But if you did, yeah, I think that may be what's going on.
Okay, yeah,
I think it's a good number, just it's not 5 years.
right. Okay, yeah, we'll take a look at that and adjust that.
So essentially, though, you're saying that for Hubbard, a total renovation is what we'd be looking at many years from now.
Modernization.
Modernization. And it's just with fixing the things that have to be fixed
Correct.
right now,
That's correct.
which is still expensive.
Correct. Roofs, as you well know, I mean, your big ticket items, roofs, HVAC, those are, things that are expensive to do. But I will say that those are also where you earn the most entitlement. So your state participation is greater in those instances where you're replacing some of those.
And if you're gonna put third of the cost.
That's right.
Here.
Comfort room is the most expensive, and second most expensive, but usually other frame.
Yep. And the other thing to consider too is that with your growth, your state entitlement dollars will grow with it because you earn more instructional units. There's also an adjustment that will be made coming up in that you might recall that last year in the General Assembly, they made the decision to count pre-K in your earned instructional units, which has never been the case before. So now your pre-K classrooms will earn you entitlement dollars and earn you innovation dollars as well.
Think it'll be 65 million, half the cost, maybe?
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
And then moving on to, the TG Scott, which is, a pretty standard, what we would call a RenMod, a renovation and modification. As you see, it is, this will be 22 years on TG Scott, and so that would be just a standard renovation to ensure that, again, you're staying in rhythm with those best practices for taking good care of your buildings. The next one is the Monroe County Middle School. Again, these are some pretty standard renovation measures to take care of there. Again, another school that, you know, is in good shape, but in need of a few mainly kind of cosmetic kind of renovation measures. And then a small bit of new construction site improvements to address some drainage, piece of kitchen equipment, those kinds of things. It gets a little bit tricky in that when we start getting into the middle school, high school piece, there's some nuance here, because typically, like if you were going to build, say, a new high school, most of the time what's happening is you're phasing out the old high school. But that's not what we're doing. So we would be asking the state to participate in renovating the current middle school, modernizing the old high school, and participate in building a new high school. And that does happen.
Has the state ever said no?
I would guess they probably have, but I'm also aware that they've said yes. So I think it's a matter of presenting a compelling argument for why this is what's best for your district and your community. And I think that compelling argument begins with the amount of growth that you're seeing and what your end goal is to create that room for your students to grow, your student body to grow into, and to have, you know, safe and quality, you know, facilities for your students, for your teachers, and your programs.
Yeah.
So there are more than 35 instructional units, say, in that building, 40 to 10, but we base that earned instructional unit number on potentially the earned instructional units with just 2 grade levels in there. Does that make sense? So if the transition was to convert that building into, say, 5th and 6th grade, we just had to estimate what we think the earned instructional units would be in that situation. And then that guides our estimate on what we think we would earn in terms of state entitlement dollars. And then you begin getting into, you know, Mary Persons High School and the modernization of that facility.
I would leave that real quick. I want to point something out that Dr. Dostler pointed out. Roger, we replaced those HVAC units on top of the middle school 2 years ago?
3 years ago.
3 years ago. So as you can see, they don't require an HVAC replacement there. However, they do require roof replacement. Okay, so some of our facilities are HVAC and roof. That facility, since it had some HVAC work done 3 years ago, it only requires a roof. Thanks.
I have a question. I noticed that the other schools, 2 elementary schools that we talked about in the high school, all have new flooring throughout and restroom modernization, but it doesn't, it's not on the Hubbard Elementary. Will they still have that as well?
That's what he was talking about. He was talking about waiting to
Complete modernization.
Right.
modernization
That
year,
would come with the 40th birthday.
which is like 2033.
Okay.
Is where you maximize your funding from that building. And since they're all built in different years, you maximize your funding at different years as you go through the calendar years and academic years.
And the same is true as we get into Mary Persons High School. You'll see some numbers on the left. Like if you look at the first page of Mary Persons High School, and you'll see built in 1984 and then in parentheses 5010. So 5010 refers to the main portion of the original structure, basically. So if you add on to 5010 and it's attached, then the state calls that building 5011. If you add on again, and the addition is not attached, then they refer to that as 50/20. So that's what those numbers are all about.
And so what he's speaking of, and it's for some of you folks that graduate from Mary Persons, and Greg and Jeremy may remember this, and of course, Ms. Battle will probably remember it, is that the 500 wing was added at a certain time, the technology wing was added at a certain time, the gym was added at a certain time. And so that's why you see it explained the way Todd explains it. It wasn't all built as one roof, okay?
Right, and that's important because, again, going back to those critical benchmarks of 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, you have to evaluate each building independently.
Each addition. Yeah.
Each addition. And when you know, oftentimes when you go into a school district, they'll refer to them with different names, like, hey, that's B building, that's C building, or that's the technology wing. But you have to then go and see what number the state assigned to that building and look at when it was first occupied to see what it qualifies for and when. Does that make sense? It can get really confusing as to why there are different, for example, if you look at 50/20, that would not be considered a modernization effort because that building was built in 2000. So it doesn't qualify for modernization funding yet. It only would qualify for renovation funding. So the level of state participation there is much, much less than it would be in building 5010. And so when you modernize a building, the state will, for them to participate, they're going to require that your architects and engineers evaluate that building and say it's structurally sound. They're going to evaluate plumbing. And when I say plumbing, I mean water supply lines, sanitation lines, all of your electrical. Every piece of that building will be evaluated, and an architect and engineer would sign off and say, yep, the building's certainly worthy of this investment. And so then you would go through, and there's a prescribed list of things that you would need to do, or things that you would need to address in your project. Because remember, if you're modernizing a building, you're essentially saying, we love it, we're happy with it, we want to keep it. Because when that modernization effort is done, the state's going to consider that a new building. And so, yeah.
Recess, it's
And
like
so
40
the clock
years.
starts right then.
20 years.
That's right. That's right. And so when we looked at the current high school, man, what a solid building. Very solid building. It is showing its age, from a cosmetic standpoint, and there are certainly things that need to be done. But based on what our experience of being there, feel it's certainly worthy of the investment. But a good, solid facility there.
Now, I gotta ask, is this a wish list, or are these things that have to be done?
Well, both.
Okay.
So if you, for example, all of those things on the modernization
That's
list,
on high school.
right,
Yeah, okay.
the high school.
Yeah.
All of those things that fall under modernization, the state will require you
This
to,
has to be done.
because remember,
You gotta
when
have
the
that.
project's done, they're gonna consider it a new school, basically. Now, there are some things that would be kind of wish list things that we've included in there. For example, the outdoor dining space courtyard. We talked about that having a safe, secure place that students might be able to go out and have lunch outside, to dine outdoors, that kind of thing. Concession stand, renovation, some of those things are sort of wish list kind of things. Moving on to The next would be just the new construction of a new 10-12 facility. Again, this is a very, very, very early, just really high-level estimate on a potential budget for a new 10-12 facility. And this, if this were to be something that we continue to, to pursue and look at, we can fine tune this budget a long way, but just for the purposes of a very high level estimate in terms of what the square footage might be and guessing on a cost per square foot number. And again, we approach that with trying to give you a higher number than what we hope that it will ultimately be. We'd rather
So you'll feel better about it, right?
that's the hope. That is the hope. Exactly.
Well, the other
So
thing
that's
is
an
that
approximate.
this facility is what begins the process of addressing overcrowding.
Yeah.
You've got to have this facility in order to do any of the options that we talked about, okay?
And is
And
the size of this facility about the same size as our current?
let's
Yeah,
say
when you
200,000 right here.
Yeah.
So 150 plus all the add-on? 178, 176.
So like, that's 200,000 square feet or so. That is, the building 5010, the main part of the high school is 147,000 square feet.
Maybe slightly bigger facility for future growth.
Correct. And the other thing that can be difficult with high schools is without doing specific programming, high school square footages can really vary a great deal based on the type of programming that you have. So we can do that, and that's part of what I was referring to by running additional budgets. We can sit down and do programming, and for specific programs, and for example, like square footages of gyms, and whether you want multiple gyms, and whether certain programs the state prescribes minimum square footages for, and depending on which of those programs you have, as part of your school.
Your classroom,
Yeah.
price per square foot is your cheapest space. Everything outside of classroom is what's gonna drive the cost up.
And so once you do all your programming, and then you consider your circulation space, and typically a good number to start with, do all your programming, a good number to start with for comfortable circulation space. And when I say circulation space, I mean like your corridor widths, your vestibule areas, all the places where people are transitioning. So once you do your programming space budget, you get a number. I would start by adding 30% to that, and then that would get you to your total square footage.
Would the ag and automotive be included in any of this for the high school? Or would they remain as they are?
No, if you build a new high school, you would build, the same CTA programs that you would currently be serving at that time, which we've been serving ag and automotive for a long time, so I don't see those going away, especially ag.
And since they're not moving it over to the.
And they're gonna move it to college
Academy,
career
they have
academy,
to go into the high
you
school.
have to put it in high school.
Yes. And Dr. Flanders, I seen you, that space budget. Yeah, so we have a template that we can continue to work with, that would help us sharpen that square footage number, as we move forward and identify those things. KB Sutton is the last school, and you'll see that school was built in 2009. And so coming up 5 years from now, it celebrates his 20th birthday, and then it's, you know, it's time for, you know, the renovation and modification work.
And if I could interrupt Kurt Todd just for a little bit, the design on this, when we first started working on it, was to get back on schedule by 2029 with the newest facility at its 20-year mark. And we would feel like we would have addressed all of the deferred maintenance, all of the deferred modernization, all of the deferred renovation. If we got real aggressive with this, had a good funding strategy, that we could get back on schedule by 2029. I really think it's gonna be closer to 2031 by now, probably 2032, maybe even later. But the plan was put in so we could get back on schedule and be in front of all of this stuff moving forward with a viable 5-year facility plan instead of chasing a lot of it.
That's right.
Because a lot of the stuff in the beginning of the book should have been done many years ago.
Absolutely.
That's right.
I mean, you're looking at Hubbard Elementary,
So
okay?
much catch
The
up.
recommendation is a 20-year on that roof, okay? It was built in '93. I'll let you do all the math, okay? But, you know, the research studies have shown that people have made a financial commitment to have done that in, you know, 2013. And so, you know, so yeah, the plan would be to try to get us back on schedule though.
And that's exactly right. I mean, this plan is, you know, an aggressive plan to make up for, you know, some lost time, so to speak, to kind of get back in rhythm with best practices as it relates to, you know, facility management. The last portion of the book is a pretty detailed timeline of things that, in order to be able to stay in rhythm with the plan, there are, you know, critical benchmarks where different stakeholder groups would need to take action, you know, to kind of stay in rhythm with the plan. For example, like when you do a renovation, some of these renovation modifications, and the way it works with the Department of Education is you have about 6 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks every summer to make application for a renovation or modification that you want to do to a school a year from now. So the way it works is that the district would make applications, say, second half of June, and all of the applications for facility projects would come into the State Department of Education's Facility Services Division. And then they package all of that need into a total budget that then the General Assembly will approve in the following session. And typically, with I think only one exception, maybe in 40 years, typically they approve a full $300 million bond package. And they approve that in the session, it goes into the budget, the governor signs it, and then shortly thereafter, then they would approve those applications in September, October timeframe. And so then you would be ready to start the project like the following summer. And so that's why the planning calendar is important, because it's just not, as Dr. Finch mentioned, you don't just say, yeah, let's go do that, and then 3 months later begin doing it. It's a careful planning process to set you up to be able to maximize state participation in your projects and take advantage of your money, your community's money that is accumulating in entitlement.
And one quick commercial is that's a reimbursement.
Right.
So they don't send you the money. So you have to make the expenditures, send in your documentation, and then about 3 months later you get your funds. So that's a thing, when you see this pot of money, but you don't get that pot of money, it's a process to get it. So that's a complicated thing about it.
That's right. And so that's another reason to carefully plan pretty far out so that you maintain the cash flow that you need, to stay in rhythm with your plan, so to speak. So, having said all of that, if you go back to tab 1 in your book, you have a budget of a budget summary page that will summarize the total cost associated with these projects, along with your potential state earnings, and ultimately for a total program cost. And as Dr. Finch mentioned, this is between where we currently are in roughly 2031. So this is 6-7 years worth of investment, into facilities. And this plan primarily reflects the option 1 approach that Dr. Finch showed. We can certainly provide other models, should the board be interested in that. And we can.
Option 1 just seems like the most logical one to me.
Right.
With least disruption, better utilization of funds and time and all.
That's right. And it gives you the most opportunity to handle the growth at every level. And I think it definitely preserves that luxury of being able to maintain that one high school kind of model, and gives you the most flexibility going forward.
And to me, it also gives us something untoward were to happen in terms of growth. The kid would adjust a little bit better using that one, that plan, that option.
That's right. And I think too, if you go look at option 2, you may have a period of time there where you may have some instructional units in places that you don't earn.
Right, yeah.
Does that make sense?
So, good question maybe for us or our staff, how about that? Student population is 4703, correct? And we had roughly 600 student increase in the past 5 years. So, what do we expect our next 5 years of growth?
Yeah, is
On
it
students.
increasing, how much faster is it increasing each
So-
year?
We don't anticipate it to grow at the same rate that it just did in the 4 years, but we don't have anything that would
Right,
dispute
well,
that.
it's a prediction, is what I'm getting at. So,
If you stretch it out over a longer time, we're gonna
Correct.
grow.
and we're, not only are we operating on a prediction of expansion and growth, but also upgrade of facilities and athletics, which is what we desperately do need. So, I just don't want a lot of people to focus on, well, you're just spending X amount of dollars on 600 more students. That's what I don't think. That can be a perception, but we're also upgrading a lot of our needed facilities, especially athletics.
And you have to build a new building.
Well,
So
we
regardless
did-
of
People
the
don't
price.
think about the age of the facilities. I mean, John Q. Public, I never won't know that university is 40 years old.
No, I just graduated from there not too long ago. Whatever. Yeah.
I don't know why we wouldn't expect it would keep growing at the same rate.
I think it will keep going the same rate, at least, or not faster.
The only thing that worries me a little bit is that we've seen growth with higher interest rates. And if interest rates come down, the builders aren't gonna, they'll start throwing up houses like crazy. And they'll be throwing up houses faster than we can throw up classrooms.
Yeah, I think
I'm
the
predicting
growth rate over the last 5 years is probably underestimating the
That's
growth
right.
rate for the next 5 years.
I mean, right now, we're showing a projection of FY '29 of 4,976. If it grows the way it's done for the last 10 or 15 years. But if we were to project it just based on that small little sample, which you wouldn't want to do that, you know what I mean? But just normal growth, we're looking at in the next 4 years being right there at 5,000.
So if we continue with option one and manage all that building, how much room does that leave us in contingency is what I would say, how much extra room will we have? You know,
Well, if-
that's one thing, you may not have the answer right
You
now.
won't be able to predict because you don't know how big the 5th and 6th grades are gonna be by then, or the 7th and 8th grades. But that's
Right.
really where you're trying to gain the most room, while at the same time gaining as much room as you can at elementary, which is the pre-K through 4 arrangement.
If you said you're opening up 100 less, I mean, that gives you a lot of time to grow for each school.
What I'm thinking is, at the end of 5 years of making all these bills, I don't wanna say, oh man, we should have made it bigger, because we need 100, we need 50 more classrooms. That's where I don't wanna be.
So the current high school, all the main campus is about 175,000 square feet, plus whatever you get off of that new freshman campus, whatever that is what a high school enrollment is holding right now. But when we talked to Todd and them the first time, we told them, we really need to plan on a 9 through 12 high school looking like 1,800, 2,000 students here.
Yeah. When we built the high school, at Kurt McPherson's building, and when we built the middle school, we had in the architectural plans, the plan for the expansion. We knew where the new wings were gonna go, and we used them. So we probably would do something like that, we planned
We could.
a new McPherson's
We could.
building.
And speaking about expansion, we could look at expansion on the current Monroe County Middle School, but it wouldn't be consistent with what we've done in the past, meaning you could probably add on to the 7th and 8th grade hall a little bit more, but you can't add on to the 6th grade hall anymore because it's fixed to be on the soccer field. Okay, it'll cross that road and go into the soccer field. So, and you really, if you're gonna be efficient, you want to expand them at the same rate instead of making one hall longer than the other one, or 2 halls longer than the other one, or whatnot. So,
Is it, you feel it's accurate to say that if we didn't do a new high school and sort of the plan to decompress, that it wouldn't be too long before we needed a new elementary and in the middle? 2 new schools?
I think you're looking at a.
If you didn't decompress them.
Yeah, you saying if we don't, let's say we don't build a new 10 through 12 facility, you're gonna have to find some way to build a new middle school and then right after that, build a new elementary
So
school.
you'd have to build 2 new schools.
You'd have to build 2 new schools.
That's what I was just gonna add on to what you were saying real quick about that, is instead of doing all this and what he's saying, if you look at the county and like where all the growth is happening at, is this the best location to expand, or would it be better just to wait, until some more subdivisions go in and see where there's going to be, and just build a new middle school and elementary or high school?
You could do that. Those tend to be more expensive when you do them that way.
Yeah.
But then you have all those, what about
Yeah,
the
land
have all
acquisition.
those, if we keep putting everything up here in this little circle, what are we gonna do with the cars? Because it's already breaking.
I mean, I get that you're just kind of spreading out the traffic a little bit, because all the people that would, have gone to like a 9th through 12th grade school is like chopping it up, like cars here, but I'm just thinking of the mom's logistics of like, if I've got 3 kids and I'm like, right now, I'm just gonna say, it's really hard to drop one off and get the other one just because of the traffic coming back, I mean, it's like really anxiety provoking, so. I mean, I just could imagine if I had 3 and I had to go to 3 different campuses.
And there's a little give and take on that the closer they are, the less you gotta travel, a little bit more
Right.
traffic. The further apart
really
they
just
are,
like cut through.
maybe a little less traffic, but
Yeah.
you still got travel time that you gotta put in there. So, and sometimes they almost end up being the same amount of time, just you're moving at some parts and you're sitting at some parts. But yes, there's still that, crowdiness
But it's gonna be much more expensive to build a whole new middle and elementary.
It would be much more expensive to
in
build
new
those
locations than to
those
build one
buildings
school.
in 2 new locations than to do this one on already owned land. You're right. We tried to go after the cheapest model.
Right, but like, I mean, it's, I know that that's a great thing to do and everything, but instead of just like putting a Band-Aid on something, you see, you project that there's gonna be so much, a need, not that much further down the road. I mean, I don't know.
If I could add one thing here, in terms of the location where the school is, in addition to the land, you also have to consider where the county and city have infrastructure to support a school, sewer, water, electrical, gas, all those kind of things.
Yeah, it would slow you down just a tad in that if you consider a new piece of property, there is a site approval process that you would go through with the Department of Education. That would involve engineers, your architect, to determine whether or not the infrastructure is there and if there are any mitigations that you would have to do. It does complicate it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking every town that's grown really fast and a lot, you know, ends up having to play schools or redistrict things. I mean,
If this county continues to grow, which I think it will, at some point we are gonna have to build new schools, but I think economically this is the best situation for right now, but I think we still should go ahead and start, continue thinking, where else can we put one?
That's what my point
Don't
is,
just
yeah.
stop, stop here with this, just know, because we've been looking for land for years for the school. We've been doing that, not knowing which way we were gonna go, but this seems to be like the best, most feasible, most economical plan to follow now to address the foreseeable future growth.
So I have 2 thoughts. One is, if we go with option 1, and put the high school here, everybody be coming off right there at Monroe Academy for the new high school, right? That'd be the entrance and exit. So how do you perceive traffic? Is that gonna alleviate some of it,
Well,
or is it gonna cause more? when we
At the
just
same
start?
time we started this, we had a meeting with GDOT, and there was a time in which they talked about a roundabout being put in that area where 18 runs into 41. They have since abandoned that. The engineers for GDOT have abandoned that for right now. And they're talking about repositioning where Highway 18 hits 41. And the way they've talked about repositioning it is that it would come in and hit 41, not in front of MCAC campus, although that road would still continue to be a turning lane to the right, but for straight-on traffic, it would hit opposite of the neighborhood traffic coming out of, I think it's called Newton Drive. Newton Drive over there. And so, we would probably lose some of our property at MCAC through eminent domain because they're gonna expand some of the lane structure there as well, so you'd have spaces to turn left onto 18 and to turn left off of 18 and to turn right off of 18. So they're talking about expanding that, and you know, the last meeting I went to that was probably in November, where they revealed the final outlook of that.
Did they have a discussion about this Montpelier roundabout? Is that still on?
I hadn't talked to them about that. I hadn't heard any more about that. But,
What about the train?
the train.
Not about the train?
Roundabouts. They put one on 87, and the people going up and down 87 never stopped for the people that were coming out, so they redid it and put a 3-day stop. They totally wouldn't stop.
One day, 18,
Yeah, I
That
like
one
it.
at
One at
Bash.
1887.
One at Bass,
Yeah, that was
It was a
hard.
little bitty one though.
Yeah.
they're expanding
But they
all
never
that.
stopped coming down 87, they just kept going through, so, you know,
It's
almost
just-
got hit
Some
twice.
people are just not familiar with it, they don't know what.
I thought
The general design of it is that you would continue flowing traffic on the
Yeah.
So
route.
the thought is that, I mean, at Peggy Sutton, the extra land that was purchased, refresh my memory, what was the reasoning behind not thinking about a middle school there? Is it traffic once again, what you get in, you get out?
No, because we had to put the two middle schools back together again, and that's when the whole facility plan on that changed.
So, but there's land there, how much
Yes.
land?
There is land there, Roger, and I can't remember how much it is.
I don't know the exact acreage, but the original plan, and White went in there was supposed to be a multifamily building at this 2007 timeframe, and where the old dairy was, and on that land, they were gonna be building a multifamily housing thing. So that was why at the time, no, I wasn't here then, but that's why the elementary school was built and the additional land was purchased for that.
But the additional land, I'm just saying, if you, down the road, if we proceed, we still got to have more schools.
We still got that one.
If we
We
gotta
still
have
have
another,
that land.
You're right.
It
another
could be
school, we
used,
still have
right?
land to put it.
Yes, and you have there's actually a lift station that the Board of Education ended up paying for that could facilitate another school being built down there at that end.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and look this up. We'll go ahead and take a break right now. We'll be back at 2:30, and we will start with Raymond James's presentation. In the meantime, feel free to grab Kurt, Todd, or whatever, and ask them any other specific questions that you may have. And other than that, we'll take some restroom break, or cell phone break, or some email break, or text break, or whatever, and come back here ready to start on 2:30.
Hey, how are you? Good, how are you? This is your They're good.
I needed it.
Coming back to the, and I think you're just.
Those terms get interchanged.
Interchanged.
Means something completely different.
Let's see.
That's a draw. You want to put like. There's what? BOE. BOE.
Court office.
Yeah, we just gotta pay for it. Now you gotta put your bill on.
One that's in six.
We'll put some ribbons around.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
That does come up.
That does come up quite often.
I scanned this last week, and she had an appointment with her doctor and her generalist Monday, and tomorrow she's being.
That's like till all the creatures all over.
Puerto Rico in March. I should have went
Okay.
to Puerto Rico.
It might be-
30.
Service.
And if you'll refer back to your agenda, this is the time where we're moving out of the construction portion and the facility capital outlay portion. And you remember, like I've said, Santa Claus just doesn't show up and hand this stuff out. I don't think Oprah Winfrey's coming and saying, you get a middle school and you get an elementary school. And so this stuff costs, money. And, what we do for capital outlay is through our eSplosh efforts. The deal that you have to remember with eSplosh is before the last 12, 18 months, we've allowed our eSplosh account to serve as kind of a rainy day fund. We can't do that anymore. We have to be more strategic with it. We have to dedicate it to improving our facilities, improving our capital projects, especially the new ones. So we have to dedicate a lot of that money towards that instead of expecting that to be an area where we capture unexpected expenses. The only other thing I'll say about that is that when you take an aggressive approach towards improving facilities or catching up on facilities, you do start crowding out the other parts of that account. Now, what are those parts? Okay, anything that starts with a B. Buses, books, bytes, B-Y-T-E-S, bytes, technology, okay? So we may have to move some of these other expenses over into the general budget, okay? Now, the general budget is where you start talking about property owners now, okay? And tax purposes for that. Capital outlay tax money, you're typically talking about people who are buying, selling, the transaction part, and people on the interstate that are going up and down, stopping at Chick-fil-A or Grits or buying something at our Walmart, okay? Always know the difference between that. When you see a building that's going up, the majority of the time that was not built on the strength of land ownership, okay? However, I do want these guys to possibly talk about a portion of the millage rate that can serve capital outlay debt. A point that I still want to hammer home is, on the parish construction side, you got Todd Simpson that has been a superintendent. He has worked with boards of education on capital improvement projects and funding them. And he's such an expert that parish thought enough of him that they hired him. Same thing with Allen County, who's been a superintendent in Madison County. Okay? And he understands capital improvement and funding for it, that Raymond James wanted to hire him. And so he has also sat as a superintendent and worked with boards of education. So we're not just talking to people who are money-grabbing entities that are trying to capitalize on some of our efforts here. Now, would there be a transaction of money in there? Of course. That's the cost of doing business, people. Okay? But we're talking to people who have worked inside schools and made a life of being an educator, and now they're trying to help us improve our position the same way that they help their district to improve theirs. So, Alan, Tom, I'll pull up your
While you pull it up, I'm gonna do a little business. I'm gonna do a little business right quick, okay? First thing is that Raymond James is not actually granting you 3 hours of whole board training. Let me explain how that happens. I work for Raymond James, okay, but I do a little side gig, which I have to declare with them. I work for Georgia Leadership Associates, okay? We just did the search for the Lamar Kansas City. And so I do a lot of board trainings, okay? And they know that I do those. So when we come to this meeting, you're gonna have this meeting. And so when we come to this meeting, that's why we got here bright and early. If I sit through the meeting and we do this meeting, I've got this meeting approved where you get 3 hours of whole board training. Well, all we have to do is you have to pay a small little fee of $350 to Georgia Leadership Associates, and you get 3 hours of whole board training. That's a really good deal. Plus, you ever read that book, Death by Meeting? We have 2 meetings, so I like I like to use it, is, hey, let's take this meeting that you gotta have, which is very important. It's not about it, and no offense, it's not about something that GSBA or somebody set for you. It's about your school system and about a perfect day. You get 3 hours of board training. So it's done through Georgia leadership. So you've got to sign, you got to do 2 things for me today. You've got to sign that sign-in sheet, board members. And then at the end, not right now, I'm going to leave an evaluation. And at the end, you've got to do that evaluation and you've got to give it back to me because we've got to make the state credit for this. Okay, so you're not just evaluating, you're evaluating the whole training today. Do you like this idea of not having, having a meeting, okay? And so, and I want to make one other clarification. I'm a little older. I appreciate that when I was asked to do it. I'm a little older than that. I never worked for the Thompson System. I worked for Thompson City, okay? So I was at RE League, so, okay, so, some of you that might be a bad, you might not like that, okay? But, I never heard Mary Person, I knew it was Mary Person High School, but in Thompson, it's persons. That's what they call you guys, persons. So, I hope that's not offensive. Yeah, well, now, I heard a little remember there, yeah.
What do we call y'all?
What, sir?
What do we call y'all?
I don't probably want to know, man. So, I was here in the late 80s, so I was fortunate. We were pretty good back then. And so, here's one thing I want to make sure of. We have great respect for parish, okay? We have great respect for parish. But we don't have what their report and all the hard work that Dr. Finch and his staff put in, we have nothing to do with that, okay? All right? We have no input, we have no say, we don't have anything to do with that. And it's not that we don't care, it's just not our business. Our business now is, you got a plan, and so we're gonna take the numbers that you have on what's the best plan, and we're gonna show you ways that it can happen. Okay, now, we're doing something we want you to make sure you understand. We know that finance is not exciting, okay? We understand, all right? And here's the thing too, don't throw any rocks at me because I don't have any hair, and I show bits pretty easy. So here's the thing I want to tell you is that if you see something you don't like, we're just trying to show you the ways that this could happen, okay? It's just a training, okay? We're just showing, okay? It's not anything. We're just going to go over this, so please understand that. And that's our job today. Tom's going to talk a lot. I'll put in. Here's the one thing I do wish you'd do today. This is not where we're just going to talk to you. We want you to communicate with us. Ask questions. Say, hey, I've always wanted to ask this question, and let's do this. So we're going to get started. Let's go. All right, Tom.
Okay, great. Well, good to be with you again. Know most of our board. Congratulations on making the Monroe School Board. It's a big job, but I'm glad you're doing it. We want to talk to you, as Alan said, about how to implement the plan. And what Parrish just showed you is what you want to do. Like Alan said, we have simply taken their plan and what Dr. Finch asked us to do to say, can we implement this in terms of, do we have the ability to pay for that? And if we do, what does that look like? What are we obligating ourselves to? Before I say that, I was talking to Jason right before we started. He's doing a GSSA facilities certification right now. And they ask me if I'll speak at that every year, and I'm happy to do it. But one of the big concepts that I talk about with those folks who are getting training on facilities planning specifically is to do what you are doing right now. It's a relatively new idea in the school world in Georgia to take a really long-term view of your facilities in terms of what we're going to do. And we mainly see it in systems like this that are experiencing growth and are smart enough to say, hey, what are we going to do if another 600 kids show up here? Right? In Georgia, this is the easy quiz. How long is the regular SPLOST period for education? 5 years. How often does the State Department tell us we need to do a facilities plan? Once every 5 years. We got in Georgia, in our brains, that we should look at our facilities for 5 years. It's just, there's a couple of just natural 5-year periods And it just became gospel in this state that I'm gonna look from here for 5 years and I'm gonna figure out what we're doing, and then we're gonna do that again 5 years after that. And it's really not the way to plan long-term public services, which is what you're providing. We not only work for school districts, we work for cities and counties. One of the big things we do for that is we work, for instance, for water systems. All right, if you're responsible for planning water treatment, sewage treatment in your community, well, what's the first thing you do? Is you say, well, how many people do we have? How much water does each one need a day? And when we get another 1,000 people, will our plant still handle that number of people? Right? And you start planning for, well, when do I need to start construction so that everybody turns the spigot and water comes out? This is the exact same thing, but you're dealing with children. And when they show up, do I have a seat for every one of them? And how far in advance do I need to start planning so that when they get here, everybody has a seat? And yours is a little more complicated because you've got to give them seats in the right grades, which is some of the things you're talking about. And I'm going to come back to that concept in a minute. But the first thing I want to say is just I want to commend you for thinking about your facilities in longer than just the next 5 years. Because not many systems do that. And it's a really good step to see a lot of systems are starting to think that way. The beginning of this is just our sales tax history. We did these various slides just a couple of months ago when we looked at the PFA bond. But we've got a full year period right now. So this is the history of the 5-year, of the education SPLOST in each of the 5-year blocks in Monroe County. You can see we are currently in SPLOST 6, which started in July 2023. The 5-year period of that will run into the summer of 2028. And our most recent 12 months is $7,879,000. That's what 1 penny of sales tax in 2024 brought in for education capital projects in Monroe County.
Okay, one quick thing here. When you look at sales tax, it looks like it's irregular. So remember in 2012, car sales tax. Car sales tax, the TAF money used to come under your eSPLOST. Now it came separate. So if you added your car sales tax to that, it's not actually a drop. It looks a little bit more. And of course, in 2018, don't forget online sales tax. Amazon, I call it Amazon. Now you have to pay that. And also remember too, inflation and stimulus money from COVID. So the federal government pushed a lot of money in, and then online sales, and then of course inflation, because most of the things that you buy, you're going to buy. You got to buy gas and groceries, whatever, whether you're in Forsyth, Georgia, or whether you're in Danielsville, Georgia. And so, it's going to be high.
This is a whole lot of numbers on this page, but this is month by month going back 10 years. You can see 10 years ago, sales tax brought in $338,000 a month. Now, last year it brought in $656,000 a month, which is really big growth. There are some irregular months. A big part of that is sales tax gets paid to you 1 month in arrears. So when you see a January check, that is Christmas spending that happens. But you're right, it's abnormally large. Another thing that happens is there are certain taxpayers that only pay quarterly. If you're a certain size, you don't pay the Department of Revenue every month. If you're small enough, so some people only pay once a quarter. Some of that could show up. Sometimes, as some of you board members will probably remember this, there's some really big folks who buy a bunch of coal over around the corner did it one time, that paid too much sales tax and then didn't pay you for a number of months. So, way back, if we go back far enough, you have some really low months. So the Department of Revenue can get these off from time to time. It's not always, that's exactly 1 penny on every dollar that was spent in the county in December. But that's what you received in that month. But it's not necessarily precisely 1% of everything that was spent in the county. I've made some other adjustments. There was a big payout, I think in September of 2020. There was a big taxpayer that didn't think they had to pay on online sales, I think, and then suddenly they realized they did. So everybody had a really big month about here. I take that out of our numbers because it's a spike that we don't need to have. If you added that in, this would have been about $300,000 larger, but obviously it would have been an irregular month. So I took that out. But you can see, like Alan said, you actually had a decline in 2020, which is what you would expect. We didn't see that a lot of places. But in 21, 22, you had 19% growth and 28% growth, which is really very good, and that would be on the higher end even through a pretty high growth period. Last year was a really much more regular year, 4%, and that was really, I would say that's on the stronger end.
Yeah, it is stronger, it is stronger. A lot of places have been 0 or 1 or even a little negative.
Right. But again, if we're looking at what's our revenue number that we have to spend or borrow against each year, it's a little shy of $8 million.
And this 5-year rolling average that he provides to you, see, that 5-year rolling average, this is 1 year look back, that's a 5-year average, and that being 9.76, that's really good.
Yeah, we just try to smooth out a little bit, what's the regular growth rate. These are still high averages because they have those 2 really big years in there. Zoomed in. One thing we watch is the education SPLOST has a cap rate. When we vote these, we tell voters this is the maximum that we will collect underneath the tax. For your SPLOST 6, that's $39.5 million. All this does is it says how much do we have remaining underneath that cap to collect, how many months do we have left. If we collect $660,000 per month, we hit the cap perfectly. I think there's potential that you get some really good sales tax payers into the county in the next short period. We'll want to watch this deadline, and are we, do we start trending to possibly have our SPLOST quit early, in which case we'd go ask for renewal early. That's not something we need to concern ourselves with just yet. We're well out of that. But, if this starts growing, we could see a SPLOST quit 1 quarter, 2 quarters early. That's just something we want to have on our radar. Right now, there's no concern with that. Formatting that off here just a little bit. But this just projects out to SPLOST 7, right? And now that's looking way ahead. We're talking about a tax that starts way out in 2028. Again, with no growth, you just multiply the 78879 5 times. That's almost 39.4 million. Here's a few growth rates. Again, it's not going to take much growth from where we are right now for us to reach that cap. So it is something we need to be mindful of. But the next SPLOST could really produce a pretty good number. That our average growth rate is a little more than 4%. That's $50 million over a 5-year period. That would get us to an average of about 10 years. We don't really like to count on that growth, but we do like to have an idea of what we could reasonably produce. So that's just the sales tax basics. When we took the parish presentation, they sent us a draft of that. We did a couple of things. One, we looked at the local cost for each project, right? They told you when you do these projects, you will have some state funds in each project, so you are responsible for the local portion. That local portion, we're talking about $132 million of local funds you have to come up with to implement that plan as they laid it out. They also, within the plan, identified dates for accepting guaranteed maximum prices. So for our purposes of planning, we assume, well, the day we go out and we sign a contract for a guaranteed maximum price, we need to have the ability to fund those projects at that time. And so we grouped these projects into dates that start in 2026, 2027, and 2028, which is a very aggressive building schedule. But again, we're taking what they've done. Dr. Finch said, hey, is this possible for us to implement this project? And if so, what does it look like? And so you can just see the totals. If you wanted to start Hubbard, Scott, and the Monroe County Middle project on January 1, 2026, one, we need the authorization to go do this in terms of getting approval. But assuming we have that, what we want to fund is that $23.6 million figure on January 1, 2026. If we were doing this, we would typically break that up. What you don't want to do is borrow $132 million when we need this initially, we need this later, right? We do this sort of in tranches. And again, this may be more than you decide you want to take on, but we're just trying to show what does it look like if we do. The 10 through 12 project is almost $78 million. Again, it's got a year later start date in terms of guaranteed maximum price. So we have a second issue that we put in there. And then the other projects both start in 2028, so we group those together. Again, there, you could probably put a little finer detail on some of this, but this is big picture kind of stuff. But you're really talking about potential for having 3 borrowings to make your funding locally.
And let me.
Yes, go ahead.
Go back.
Sure, sure.
If you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
And so, since we've said that, just keep this in your mind, since we've said that the 10, 11, and 12 facility is what provides the impetus for a lot of this overcrowding and use of facility space, if we just get to a point where we just run out of space at the middle school and we have to do something right now, remember, we'll have to work on the repurposing over here, which is going to require a local financial commitment with no state reimbursement on this, okay? We have to pull out the 8th grade and put them right there, or pull out the 6th grade and put them right there in order to alleviate overcrowding. So, you know, if you wanted to go after this fast, you try to build that 10, 11, and 12 facility as fast as you can, but again, you have to measure all of this out relative to your capability of being able to pay for it.
That's right.
Because if you look at what provides the best opportunity for alleviating overcrowdedness, it's also the most expensive item on here to fund.
Right.
So that's kind of the little paradox there.
Yep.
And a quick commercial real quick. What does the state, I know we have a new board member, but what does the state give you per square foot to build a new school? Do you know? What is it? $84. What was the true price you quoted? $375. You hear what I just said? The state's going to give you $84. They give you 80 for an elementary school, 82 for a middle school. So they give you 80, and it costs $374. Okay. Here's the other thing about you need to understand. This number seems high. I know it seems high to you, particularly as a new board member. You don't get equalization here. You don't qualify for low wealth. You definitely don't qualify for low wealth private Pacific. So there's no economic incentive that other districts get. You know, you might hear district, Oglethorpe County, how do they get $25 million to build it? Well, they consolidate their primary and elementary school because they're low wealth private Pacific. They get special qualifications. You don't qualify for that money. So you're trying to build a school mainly on $84. So that's why it is like, that's the reason the price is so high.
And we've had that problem for 40-some years.
Yeah, you have. I was shocked. You know, I forget about, no offense, George Power. I was shocked. You don't get equalization. Baldwin County, Gwinnett County. It's your fault. It's not, you know what I'm saying? But that's the reason why. I mean, you know, y'all had it, which was a great impetus, economic impetus, but for equalization purposes, I mean, Gwinnett County gets equalization.
Oh, I know.
I mean, they got this.
Houston County gets it.
Who?
Houston County gets it.
Oh, yeah, Houston County gets it. Yeah, I know, but you don't get any.
We get 0.
We just get to give out money.
That's right.
And I'll make a second point while we've got this chart up here. A lot of times one thing we hear is, this is great, I think that's too quick for us to get to that project. Right, let's take a break, let's do that a year or 2 later. Okay?
But the plan is
Well, it's a plan, but even a simpler point than that. Let's say we put that project off for 2 years, and it increases in price by 5% a year, and ignoring compounding, a 10% increase. What's 10% on 78 million? 7.8. What do I bring in as lost in a year? Right? So make that project 85 million, sit out a year, and just, you know, hand over another year's worth of sales tax, right? It's, you chase your tail when you get into big numbers and you just let the inflation total level all up. It's a hard thing to ever catch up to when the numbers get big and the prices, I mean, hopefully they'll go sideways a little bit. They have. The inflation has slowed down. But if we go back through a period like we just did, imagine 20% on that number. Right? It is hard to catch up because that inflation cost, it's one of the things we fight. We're bond guys. Our business is you issuing bonds. We're very transparent about that. It is easy to poke, well, man, we're sure paying a lot of interest here. It's because I'm going to put it on a piece of paper and show you what the number is. nobody ever says, well, what would these schools cost if we had done this 5 years ago? Right? Because at $250, this plan works a whole lot easier, but we weren't ready to do it then.
Show me what it costs 5 years in the future.
Right, well, exactly, and that's the problem, we don't know, right? And so one's a known, because you're gonna get a schedule, and it's gonna say, man, we're sure paying a lot of interest, and the other's unknown, and it's a whole lot easier for the public to criticize you for one versus the other.
Price ain't going down.
No, but prices rarely go down, exactly right. So anyway, I just wanted to point out, it's, 10% on that's what you're bringing in each year in SPOS. So delaying kills these things. It makes them harder and harder to ever get there. This is a chart. I know some of the numbers are small, but I'll step in here and show you a few things. These are your existing bonds. These are the 2023 bond. These red bars are what we just did with the PFA. Okay, so in terms of total payments, this is somewhere in the range of 7.3, and that navy bar is that 7.8 or so that we're bringing in each year of sales tax.
So you can see how close we are to the ceiling.
Right, now I'm going to point out a couple of things. One, this has your sales tax just going purely level for the next 30 years.
Not even growing.
Oh, sorry, I touched something.
Yeah, it's real sensitive.
Excuse me. That's no growth in sales tax, but I'll take you back when we did that PFA issue. One of the questions was, why are we paying for this over 15 years? Right, and not quick, because that's a valid criticism. If we crushed all those payments down here, we probably could have paid it off in another 3. The problem is, I can't do anything else until 2032 if we max out all those payments, right? We have no, you can press this down, there's no room for anything else.
So the green is the CCA, the freshman campus and stadium and field house.
Yes, sir.
And then the salmon color is,
Backwards.
The green is the CCA and freshman campus. The salmon is the field house and the stadium renovations.
Right. Another reason was, why are we doing that now? It's because I don't know when we're going to be able to get back to doing a lot of those kinds of things either, because of this stuff that you got ahead of.
And the other point that, see how close we are to the funding ceiling right there for eSPLOS. That's how much, that little gap right there is what we have for textbook, buses. And we're fixing to have to change out these devices right here, because they're fixing to age out. And we won't be able to get all of that. We're going to have to get out of that. We're going to have to move some of those budget items into the general budget. Now, once we clear past 2029, we're going to have a little bit more debt room in our eSPLOS account.
All right, so if we start adding those things in, remember I told you we really bucketed those into 3 different starting points for the projects, right? I don't have it in front of me, those totals. I've got that clear. So you're going to see some really long-term bond issues here. We're basically talking about running bonds out for a period of 30 years, which seems like a long time. How old are some of the oldest facilities that we're still using in this system?
The one's 42 right now.
Okay, so when Alan and I, we have colleagues all around the country who do what we do, but they don't have, in their various states, they don't have a SPLOS, right? They think it is absolutely insane that in the state of Georgia, we pay off buildings that we use for 40 years in a 5-year period. And it might be, because when we pay for things for 40 years, we don't do anything but that one thing for a 5-year period, right? So, I know this looks like a lot, but fundamentally, you're matching the life of your asset with the liability that offsets that asset. Does that make sense? We're matching the funding a little bit better, which, that same concept we were talking about, it leaves space for us to do other things that we get to use immediately, that our children get into immediately. Again, things that are more quantitative than qualitative, but the idea that the new 10 through 12 can start here instead of starting out here in 2034 is the idea I'm talking about. I don't necessarily like that we stretch this out, but what can we do with our debts typically if we start, we have a windfall and I get a bunch of extra money, I can prepay a debt. What I cannot do, even with my home mortgage, is go to the bank and say, hey, y'all tack 5 years onto the back of that mortgage, I'd really like to just pay you less right now. Right? I can always shorten my mortgage and send more money to the bank. What the bank doesn't let me do is call and say, hey, let's just put a few more years on the back. I mean, you can refinance it, obviously, but not with a general obligation bond. That requires go to the voters and ask for another 5 years. And an expensive refinance, as opposed to start here. If our growth slows down, we've got extra money, I can shorten a bond. Right? I can always call a bond in, but they have some limitation on that. But you can always shorten a debt. What we can't do is extend debts. So what I'm showing you is basically a very long-term period. But this layers in the cost of those first 3 projects. And again, let me just flip to that so I can name them properly. My sheet here. Okay, so this is Hubbard, Scott, and Monroe County Middle. And we clear that line, right? We have done those 3 projects, and in terms of a revenue versus our expense, we are cash flowing that project, right? All right, now starts the shock and awe here. But, this is the 10th through 12th project. And again, these are rough debt numbers going out to that 30-year period. I think everybody will admit we've got a rough construction estimate as well, right? I mean, we're talking the right order of magnitude, but not a certain level of precision. But this is what it looks like when we fund a $78 million project on top of that. That's a whole lot, but can we do it? I'd argue that going from 7.8 up to 8.2 between now and 2030 is pretty doable. I don't have a lot of concern about that, but what we're doing is we are crowding out those other things like we talked about. No paper, buses, books, computers, technology. We're using a lot of that budget, obviously. And now, again, nobody throws shoes or anything, but
We don't know that black line's gonna be flat, we hope it's going.
Oh, yes, ma'am, we're gonna hit that, thank you for bringing that up.
And you're right.
We'll talk about it.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's about as conservative as we can get over a 30-year period.
That's not
And then
good.
all the new things that are coming in.
That's not.
If I go back, sales tax didn't exist, but if I went back to 1994 and looked at what was the sales tax bringing in, what would a 1 penny sales tax bring in, that predates sales tax, but let me tell you, first really full year of 1998, if I go all the way back, I'm not going to flip back there, you were about 4 million, right? You doubled in less than 30 years on the other one. Is it reasonable that that line ought to be way up here by 30 years? Yes. Now, what does it look like between here and there? It's going to be a little, that's anybody's guess. But you're right, you're going to grow. And I'm going to make another comment on that in just a moment. But just for purposes of finishing, how would we pay for this plan? Well, excuse me, I had my slides out of order.
That's right.
That's what 2% growth on the sales tax looks like, right? That 5-year average, and admittedly has 2 really big years in it, has been about 4 to 5%. This is if you grow 2% a year.
So we can still buy books and they can.
You do, now, and now you're gonna have other needs also, right? We talked about that a minute ago. What happens if we get 600 more kids, or 1,000 more kids? There's gonna be need to build another school.
A new track.
Right. Tracks, gyms, there's other things that have to happen. But let me tell you something else that really is a carryover from that water sewer type planning. We tell people, if you're planning a water sewer system, plan to expand that plant when the usage gets there, right? And the way you figure that out is how many people, how much they need each day, and I can figure out when I hit a population level is when I need to expand my water treatment plant, right? And again, I know this at school, but the concept is I don't know the date, but I know the number of students. But, right? you guys could tell me, if I told you what the student population was when we did the building. And we can't tell when those students will get here, but let me tell you something about sales tax. Revenue and people show up together.
Very important.
Right? I mean, that's logical. We get rooftops, what do you get with that? When you get people, you get houses. You get houses, you get property tax. There are certain businesses who locate in town, restaurants. You know how they do that? By traffic count and by population.
At the same time as you build it.
That's right. No, they don't. They don't.
Have to think way out.
But the point is, don't be afraid necessarily of growth. But you do have to trust a little bit that the revenue will show up and people show up. I mean, it's happening, right? Go back to that chart. You know, go all the way back here. 600 people showed up somewhere in here, right? And then again. Excuse me. All right? I mean, now you do have to have a little faith that that's going to work out that way. But what I can tell you for sure, I can't tell you exactly when, but I can tell you you should experience some growth in your sales tax over a 30-year period. We're through 2. This is what it looks like with a little bit of growth. This is what if we add phase 3 on top of that. And again, I know what I'm putting in front of you is daunting. And we've obviously got a problem here, right? That's already assuming 2% growth, and that's not working. So what does that tell you? That tells you that to implement this project, you probably either need more sales tax growth, or you've got to look for a different revenue source to make the payment on this project, which the way we do this is a bond millage. And again, nobody throw anything at me. I'm just telling you how to make it work. But I've got one more slide. This is the 2% growth bumped by bringing in 1 mil of tax to support that program. We got one little problem there that we can solve. But that that bond millage would have a few other benefits. One thing is there is some interest on these bonds that would come due that if we don't have a current payment source, meaning the SPLOST that's levied here is not eligible to pay bonds that were authorized after that SPLOST was implemented. So what I've built into all these numbers is what we call capitalized interest for several years. These numbers assume that we are borrowing money to cover the interest until the next SPLOST starts, which is a sort of inefficient way to use your bond money, right? It's borrowing to cover interest payments until the new SPLOST can start. If we have a bond bill that comes into effect, I can pay that interest directly, and I'm not borrowing for it each year, which saves you some money. We borrow less in that scenario. One thing I would say about this plan, it's in 3 phases. You know, I talked about that idea of building for growth. We get the benefit of knowing what's happened between now and 2026 and 2027 and 2028 before we necessarily kick off, you know, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, right? It's 2027. Has sales tax grown 2% a year since we thought about doing this? Well, we know that by the time that we go and actually implement this plan.
But our SPLOST can't increase 2% a year because we're maxed out on what we can collect.
No.
Up until
That's a great question. Okay, so let's talk about that. I'm so glad you brought that up. So you set a cap on your sales tax, right?
39
Okay,
million or
so
something.
once you get ready to reach that cap, all you have to do is vote to renew that, and then once that sales tax ends, the next one starts, you lose no revenue. So if you collect it early, then you just simply vote before that collection, before that period's up. As long as you have voted, as soon as that one sales tax ends, you go straight into the other one. You don't lose one penny.
Can you increase the cap though?
Yes, the next one is not discriminable, but it's not a problem at all, as long as you vote ahead of time, because we get with a lot of people there, and they think that they're not gonna get sales tax for a year, and that's real important, that is not.
Based on recent collections, you could say, we're expecting to get 44.5 million this time instead of the 39.5 million in the last cycle.
Well, no, but you gotta go back to the voters early.
Correct.
Go back.
You go back early.
Yeah, that's the only thing you gotta do, yes, sir.
But you're borrowing on the assumption that people keep passing this thing.
Okay, so so I'm glad you asked that
Excellent
question.
point.
So here's the question, okay, so let's talk about that. We'll show you a slide where people have done SPOS for 25, 30 years, okay? You're a poor district, South Georgia, you're doing a major project, it's gonna take you 30 years, right? You're very poor, you're very impoverished. There's never, listen, I'm from Georgia, I'm a quarter mountain, okay? Mountain people's crazy, okay? Well, if you know that, where we are, right? So there's some crazy people around the state, okay? There's never been a school system in Georgia that have an outstanding bond past 5 years that the voters never voted to continue to SPOS.
I'm not
Because if you
saying it's
don't,
likely, I'm just saying.
yeah, well, it's never happened,
You're right.
because if you do that, it's an intelligence test. Because if you vote no on that SPOS, you just voted the biggest property increase. So it's never happened. It's never happened. So I know as a board member, I'd be nervous, but I would feel better that it's, and there's places, they're different now around the state, okay? Now, we go all around. But there's never been one
So
One
if we didn't approve it, and get it voted approved, we would be even more different.
And that's not gonna happen. There are too many smart people in Monroe County, I promise you that.
And I did want to show you some of that. And again, we were asked, how would you implement this? And what we don't like to do, because there are some things we can do to make this maybe a little more tolerable, which is we could move some of this principal in here, and I could stick it out here, so that our payments match that curve, right? But if I do that, if I'm backloading our payment on our bond, we do take, well, we pay more and we also eat into that, well, how am I gonna pay for the school that I need out here? Right, I mean, I want us to, I know that this may be a period of discomfort, but I'd much rather us clear the hurdle and that be the level, because as we go forward, we're gonna need capacity to do that, right? I don't wanna set you up where, well, we've done all we can do for 30 years and we've already spoken for all of growth, right? I want us to do it as low and as level as we can, clear that bar, and then figure out what we're gonna do going forward.
Tom, can you talk a little bit more about the strategy of a bond millage?
Yep.
And what I mean by that is, and to my knowledge, I don't think I've ever worked in a district that utilized one. Peach County didn't utilize one, did it?
No.
Okay, all right. And I know Bill does.
This,
So,
this chart might be a year old, but yeah, I'll
I
talk
work
about
in the district that has.
point being is, are there multiple ways in which to utilize a portion of your total millage for bond debt purposes? Meaning, can you utilize your existing millage? Meaning, like right now, we're at 16.212. What if we designated 15.212 to serve and pay M&O and allow one millage of that total 16.212 to serve the debt? Or do you have to go 16.212 and then add another mill? Are there multiple ways to do it?
Sure. You can always, well, what you're getting from the voters is an authorization that it's okay to do.
And do you have to get authorization on both of those
No,
entities?
they actually authorize the bonds. And that has embedded in it the ability, if necessary, to levy the bond bill. Right, what it'll say is, we can pay some maximum amount of the bonds with sales tax, and we'll pay the balance with bond millage or vice versa. But, no, you could always roll up a bond bill and roll down your M&O, and what I get is a neutral tax bill. Right,
So
I've
it
just
can stay at
committed one of those bills
16.212
for
and still be
capital.
able to get some of that.
That's right.
But here's the footnote for it. Okay, if you do that, it's clean, you're not voting on anything, and people aren't out hearing the word bond millage. But if you ever get the bond millage passed, and it's separate than your M&O budget, you only do your taxpayer hearings on your M&O millage. So once the bond millage exists, and if you can ever get it through, then it's better if it's by itself, but it's a lot harder to get through. So let's explain bond millage real quick. What happened in '96? There was a sales tax, right? Then 98, they made it, the schools got the sales tax, right? 97, law passed 97. So used to, in the 90s and 80s, when you had a big project, what did you do? The taxpayers went, you had to vote a bond. So now here's the major mistake that we made, and I made this mistake as superintendent. It was the dumbest thing that I ever did as superintendent for that. Okay? And that's saying a lot. Okay? So we had a bond millage, so my county had a bond millage. We're poor, very poor. Madison County's poor, all where it's located. And so we had a bond millage. We're getting ready to build a new high school, core high school, and we did away with our bond millage. Well, at that time, that bond millage was only worth about $500,000. Now it's worth like 1.3. So we let the bond millage go away. So we thought we did a big tax break. Frank King told me this. He said, Alan, they'll never remember that you did away with the bond millage. The papers will never report it. They'll never show that you had a tax drop or whatever. So a bond millage is a weird thing. One city, like Jones County, how many people know that Jones County has a bond millage? Raise your hand, serious. How many people know, other than educators? Other than educators. So none of the board members here, do you know that what is Jones County's bond millage? 1.7. Have you ever heard anybody complain about it? Have you everybody complain? So once it's there, it's beautiful. But now I'm going to be honest with you, I'm a superintendent. We let it drop. If I could go back in time machine, that's when I'd go back to financially tell these school systems, don't let it drop, don't let it drop, don't let it happen, because inflation is going to get you one day. Don't do away with your bond millage. But we did. But to get it back is not easy. Okay, I'm straight up with you. It's not easy to get it back. And so what some systems have done is what you've done.
So as the value of your mill grows, that's more debt that you can serve by that.
There's a South Georgia district that I don't want to name, that I don't want you, but they had that one mill, bond millage, and man, that thing's been growing. It's near Columbus. It's not in Columbus. It's near Columbus, north of it, and it's growing. That value mill is growing. So they always keep in debt because they got that bond millage. So they always keep in debt. Man, they got good.
Well,
Makes sense.
And the way to think about it, really, you're thinking about it the right way. When you use that, excess SPOS falls back into that other stuff bucket, right? You're funding the first little bit of that bond payment, and what that means is that there's excess SPOS to pay for.
Well, it diversifies debt, and it doesn't put as much strain on the
sales
loss
tax.
account.
That's right. It gives you that money back. It's not direct, but it's really the money, it's the amount of money that's available, or it adds to the amount of money that's available for buses and technology and those things. But it's really almost best thought of as a dedicated mill for capital.
Yes.
Right, because it's freeing up a like amount of sales tax that can be used for this.
So you would drop in your normal operations budget, correct?
You can.
I know you would if you went for the bond millage.
That's right. I mean, what I'm saying is you don't have to.
You can add them.
It can be in
Millage
addition
on top of
to,
it.
you can.
Or you can
offset.
add.
Or you can reapportion what your existing one is.
I think one time we had bond millage.
You probably did.
About all systems.
Back in the 80s.
We had
one, because I remember at that time, there was a 20 mil cap on your M&I.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. Still there.
3%, a 3 mil cap on your.
Yes, ma'am. And you had a bond, a 1990-something bond that we refinanced,
Yeah.
I mean, 15 years ago probably, but it was probably a legacy project actually. This chart is a year old. We've been just moving this training so many times, everybody sent tax bills out again, but, some of your neighbors are on here, Crawford, Jones, and Lamar. Lamar, until recently, they may still be, but we're levying 1.5 mil.
Can you blow that up? Or not?
I've touched this thing so many times, I might be able to.
Oh,
There we go. Yeah, Eccles, not only is Eccles at 4, in 2008, Eccles built a K-8 school. And it took them, for one K-8 school, took down there, they don't get much in sales tax at all, and we're in the mill. They have, a K-8 school took them 20 years worth of sales tax plus 4 mills of property.
Wow.
And so Henry's at 20, yes.
And now Henry's down now. I know for a fact Henry has rolled theirs back because Henry is really through their period of crazy growth. But Henry for years has been maxed out on M&O, has also levied over 3.5
That's in
mil.
Jackson County, okay, it's not Butts, that's Jackson County.
And so you can see there really are, I mean, it's a diverse group of school districts, right? You got folks like Little Old Marion, and you got folks like Walton and Henry, right? Everybody's, it's a growth thing, and it's who got way behind is part of it too, right? The further behind, the deeper this is eventually, is one of the things to look at. But you're right, yeah. Some of the folks, the Websters and the Quitmans and the Millers of the world, they really need it. Forsyth County. Got a bond millage.
Gwinnett, all the money they have.
They got, yeah, Gwinnett. You know what Gwinnett gets in sales tax every month? I want to think of, guess that, 10 million, almost 20. Monthly.
What's that payroll?
All right, now they got, they got a bunch of mini schools too, right? They got a lot of need, but they levy a bond millage in Gwinnett. Alan and I were talking about, I've got a brother, and he's got high school age kids, and his, they obviously know what I do, and his wife said, how do they have that over in Jefferson City? They're in that northeast Georgia area, want to know how Jefferson City does it.
But don't you feel?
2.5 bond mills is how
Don't you
Jefferson
feel
City
sorry
does
for
it.
people that live in Jefferson City because
Well-
they have Jackson County taxes and Jefferson?
Well, they don't pay Jackson County school taxes,
Not school taxes, but overall taxes.
but that's right. Well, do you live in the city of Monroe?
City of Forsyth.
Sorry, city of Forsyth, excuse me, Monroe County. Okay, well, folks who live in the city here have both of them too. But you're right, Douglas County, Commerce City, Cherokee, 1.5 mills in Cherokee County, right? I mean, it's a surprising chart when you
Grew on the
see.
north end like Henry grew on the south.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
They did. Bryan schools.
Yeah, that's a really growing on
They're
that.
fixing to grow like
Yeah,
crazy.
They're growing.
they're hard, right?
They're growing. So it's one of those things where it really is eye-opening when you think, how could we do this? Who would do this?
But how many counties have rejected a bond millage? And to put on
The
the ballot?
only one I knew in the last 40 years was Wilkerson, right?
Wilkinson did, but they got a different set of issues.
Yeah, that's not the only thing, that's the only one I'm aware of.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that's the
And
only,
this-
it's,
There could be,
my
but
village has
it's
been around a
rare.
long time.
And
so
if you
there's
do a
several
bond,
different-
if you do a bond millage, you advertise it basically as this bond millage is paying for a new high school involved.
What you advertise is the bonds. You
Okay.
go and explain to the voters, these are all the things we intend to do, and we want you to approve that bond.
Just like we do with the East Plus.
That's right, exact same process as the East Plus. Your ballot question looks a little differently because you're asking them to approve the bond question and usually an extension of your sales tax, those two things together. But it's, again, it's how do you do this is the question we were asked. And this is our answer. This is the answer of how you do these things. And we're not trying to minimize the lift that you're looking at. But if the goal is to do these things, get your facilities back into sort of, starting position again, right? Everything's modernized and you're about to move into that 40-year window where you're eligible for state funds and might want to look at new facilities.
Yeah, but we learned it doesn't matter if you're 40 years, they're still only picking up a small
Well, that's true.
quarter maybe of the cost.
That's
Can
right.
you go back to that graph without the bond millage?
Yeah. Right there. Yep,
So that's out 30 years, right?
that is.
There's no way we don't need more infrastructure in 30 years than what we're doing right now.
Yeah,
Where's the
I
money
think you
coming?
need more. Yeah, absolutely. You're gonna need more. I mean,
I mean, this buys us some time, but it doesn't buy us 30 years.
well, and the other point also is, are you going to do these things that you've heard about today at some point? And do you expect them to be more affordable at some point in the future?
No.
And I just don't know how you get there either. So these aren't my decisions to make, but that's the thing that you always have to balance. And I know this is a big thing to bite off, but if I don't bite it off now, when am I gonna do it? And I don't know. Again, that's a training starter question maybe for you to think about, well, how do you catch up?
So I can't read the numbers, so
Sure.
when do we become cash flow positive again? Without a bond
This,
growth?
at a 2% growth, this is way out 2039 or so.
That's 2039? Yeah.
That's based on 2% growth now, that's not, y'all gonna get a Buc-ee's, are y'all getting a Buc-ee's?
Yeah.
So we're not
There's
saying,
gonna be I can tell you, there's gonna be something, I don't know if it's that, but you're gonna have a Buc-ee's kinch in this graph at some point.
so we're hoping that this, we're hoping this is conservative. You see what I'm saying? We're hoping that it's not 2%, 2% you did, man, 2% correct, sir?
That's right.
And so we're hoping that, I mean, let's hope, I hope it grows 4%. Yeah, whatever, I really do.
Supposedly Buc-ee's, south of us draws about $1 million per 1 cent sales tax.
How Buc-ee's on its own, that I can believe, and we work.
1 million per 1 cent, so
Yeah.
you got 4 cents here and 1 cent. So,
Yeah, I mean, the Peach has seen a substantial increase in their sales tax, and I can't single out what Buc-ee's is, but it's a big part of it. Peach happens to be on, that part of the interstate is Peach County.
They're somewhere in between $300,000 and $350,000 a month, and now they're between $700,000 and $750,000 a month. So they say that Buc-ee's has contributed at least $400,000 a month to their each.
It's a lot.
It's changing.
I can tell you the bond numbers are working a lot better in Peach than they did 5 years ago.
So that's the thing we need to remember, that he's being conservative, he's not putting, you know, that.
And that was my point a moment ago, is, you know, we know more information as time goes on. And we know, well, has the sales tax actually done what we were hoping it to do? Has it done better? Has it done worse? The problem is, at some point, you either got to get started or not. And, you know, all this ultimately requires that you put a referendum out. And you say, this is what's in our plan, and this is what it's going to cost, and this is what we expect to have to pay for locally. And you're asking for the approval to do that. And that's you know, that can be a big lift. But that's where you get, let's see,
Yeah, this is, go back to inflation real quick. You know, Tom was talking about money and said, well, you know, so look, from January 20th to July 30th, inflation was 30%. So those numbers that we didn't coordinate their numbers, okay? So this goes to show you, if you wait, you'd be surprised how many trainings that we did where people said, we're not gonna build right now, we're gonna wait and save some money. Did they save money? They lost substantial money, okay? I know it sounds crazy, you mean we borrowed to save money, and unfortunately in bonds, because of how bonds are structured, you actually save money. Because if you wait, you think your price, look at how it's declined, real quick, that's just.
Yeah, this is, you know, inflation really, if you think about it, it's the decline in my purchasing power, right? I used to be able to buy $1 million worth of goods. For the same $1 million, I can buy what used to cost about $616,000 10 years later. Right? I mean, that's what happens over time. You just erode your ability. Your dollar gets you less and less when inflation is occurring. Let's see. I think that is probably, these are systems who've used long-term bonds, and I know this is really small for you, but again, you know, who does this is a big question, right?
And there's the first question that I asked.
Yeah.
When we sat down and talked about this, I said, Tom, after we showed him what the total price was, I said, who in the world goes after bonds that can total 138 million over this time frame? And he looked at me and said, they do it every day. And I didn't realize that. You know, you hate the terms of borrowing money and I'm fixing to pay interest and all this other kind of stuff, but it's not like we're out here trying to be the lone wolf.
I mean,
or the.
So basically, everybody's borrowing against future swaps.
I mean, but again, I've borrowed against 30 years of my paychecks going forward.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to build a house buying a piece of plywood every month, right? A few studs. It just doesn't work, right? I've got a 30-year mortgage. And actually, right now, I'm thrilled to have a 30-year mortgage. It's costing me about 3%, and I can put my money in the money market and make 4%. throw me in that briar patch, right? I wish I'd have borrowed more money, honestly. I can pay it off whenever I want to, right? I can always repay it. But no, the fun thing for us is to, you look back, I've been doing this 20 years this month, you look back at your career, and I can just see this chart, and I see places like Vidalia City Schools. That was a high school that they never thought they were gonna build. And we talked to them about doing a 20-year bond, which at the time for them was not something anybody wanted to do. And I can go down there today, and their sales tax is bringing in, nearly twice what it takes to pay that bond. We got cheap money, we're not in any interest to pay it off, and we got plenty of money for other things. It just, you grow into.
And there's enough of those that have more than one bond.
Yeah, they have this.
Well, that's right, and it's because, like Barrow, Barrow's a great, they're a poster child for this.
I'm asking.
Yeah, Alan was at that.
Chattahoochee.
And there's a lot of districts, not all, there's tons of districts that borrow, clean, I mean, there's tons, yeah.
But like a Barrow, I can tell you why this is. That, because what it was is they realized we're a really fast growing system. Barrow's got between 15 and 16,000 kids in little old Barrow County now. But what they realized was, this first bond was we were going to pay everything in 10 years. That was done in 2005. And what they realized pretty quick is we are out of money. This is the only place I've ever gone back and asked the voters to do what we talked about. Hey, can we pay that off in a longer term? And we paid off a 10-year bond to go and spread it over 16 years. Because they got so strapped and needed more money, and it was expensive to do. And ever since then, Barrow said, well, let's do, a 17-year bond, a 19-year bond, because they're just layering on pieces, and it leaves room for other stuff because they know they're growing and have to have that room. Barrow's going to sell bonds in the next 2 months, and it'll be probably 2042 or 2047.
Scroll that up.
Right, but they know what they're doing, they're leaving room for other stuff. And they happily sold 20-year bonds out in 2020 at a rate of 2%, right? Again, they're not mad that they have 2% debt outstanding for another 20 years. It's working out pretty well. Yeah. Harris County's on here, 15 and 18 years. They've got another 15-year bond that'll come around. Lawrence County Schools was a great example. Lawrence built the new East Lawrence High School and West Lawrence Middle at the same time and did a 13-year bond to do it. And then they were kind of in the middle of the splosh. But what Lawrence realized is, I can't build something in East Lawrence and not something in West Lawrence. So how do we do that? Well, borrow longer term and do them at the same time and keep the peace.
And they actually did it before inflation got big, so they saved tons.
Yeah, I bet they did those at $250 a foot or something. I don't know what the price was.
I know y'all did one, what was yours?
We did East Lawrence. East Lawrence is what we built.
What was the price, remember, per square foot? Just guess.
I would guess in the 250-ish.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing.
So,
you quoted 376 today, they built.
You could have said something higher, make it feel better.
A little bit.
But the point is,
yes, I could be wrong.
but think about what Lawrence's alternative was, right? They could have built one school at $250, paid it off in 5 years, and come back and built the next school 5 years later and gotten a $375 quote for it, right? And nobody would be better off with that, and they would have had kids in the school 5 years later, right? And it's hard to think this way because personally, none of us really want to be in 30-year debt, right? We don't. But what I tell people all the time is, I have plans to retire. And you have plans to retire, and what I want to do is pay off all my debts and retire. The school district doesn't retire.
Right.
30 years from now, somebody's going to be here, and you're going to have a superintendent and board, and they're going to be trying to figure out where to put kids in schools. And they're probably going to have some debt to do it, right? We just don't ever, as a school district, get to pay everything off and say we're done. It just doesn't. That's not how eternal public institutions exist, right? We don't say, well, we figured it out, guys. It doesn't work. There's always the next thing. And so when you start to have that mindset, you start to think about, well, if I'm gonna have to provide these facilities, what's the most efficient way to provide it, right? And those are some of the concepts we're talking about.
Well, you look at all these other schools, I mean, you look at all the schools around us that have made these improvements, and then we all look at it, and parents look at it, and tell us we're way behind, we need facilities like that, you know, we want that. We have a terrible facility here. Well, how are they doing that? This is how we get it done.
That's how they're doing it.
That's how they're doing it, yeah.
Spalding County brings in $31 million a year in sales tax and issued 25-year bonds with a bond millage. Because they were growing. You know, they were gonna have to go to double sessions and start somewhere in some way. And they said, you know what, y'all want us to do that, or do you want to pay a bond bill and us, you know, build enough schools to put all your kids in? You know, people that go build the schools. Now, it's not, you know, you have to explain it. I mean, it's eye-popping what we're talking about doing, but, again, places do it. I'm not saying, I'm not suggesting any of this is easy.
Well,
But again, what we were asked was, how can we do it, and how would we do it?
Albert Einstein called compounding interest the eighth wonder of the world. And the reason for that is because the earlier you start, the better you benefit. And that's on the debt side and the investment side. Okay? So the deal that you have to kind of remember here, I'm just going to echo what Alan said, the longer you wait, the worse you're going to get on the debt side, and you still have the aging facilities and the getting behind schedule on deferred maintenance, but you also start running out of facility space and whatnot. So we have a lot of forces that are working against us here, and it's very complex. There's going to be a lot of paradox and decisions here that you're going to have to make. And I've said this, and we've been planning this for, you know, the better part of going on 18 months. And my staff has heard me say this 30 times at least. But it don't matter if Jim Finch is the superintendent or Bozo the Clown is the superintendent. And some people may argue that they're one and the same. But the point being here, I'm just putting the information in front of you because I feel like we've really kicked the can down the road and we have not made the critical decisions that we have to be making. And it doesn't matter if I'm sitting here or not. If somebody else comes in as a new superintendent and is not telling you this, they're simply just not telling you this, okay? So, I'm not trying to say don't shoot the messenger, but I am saying that as a superintendent, it's my job to make you aware of the matters that are important and the ones that are critical as we try to move forward. And it is nothing different than the city council is having to experience with a growth in population and a strain on services for them. The same thing with the county. And so we're going to have a strain on our services, and our services are providing teaching and learning and space in which to do that. And the more people that start to show up, the more strain we're going to have to start getting. And we're already anywhere between 4, 5, 6, and 7 years behind, and that's being nice about it, I think.
It's not like we can turn kids away.
And you can't ever turn it away. You know,
So
if this were a private institution and we felt like, well, we don't have the money to expand, we're not adding any more teachers, you can't come. You know what I mean?
Right.
All right.
Okay.
Is that about?
That's all we've got.
Q&A time, Q&A time.
Yeah,
Y'all
we'll
good?
ask questions.
I know we've
We'll
kind of
ask
asked them along the
questions.
way, but, and you may need some time to kind of reflect and gather thoughts on it, and, I mean, they're not going to keep showing up and answering our questions, so you might want to try to get those that you can get answered right now.
You just want to forward that PowerPoint?
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Finch has it.
I have it, I'll shoot it out to you in the Friday update.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a bad idea, actually, so we can go back and reference it.
Yeah, Dr. Finch has it.
I'll make sure that the 5-year facility plan is also in there. And now, you know, I'm gonna make it read-only and stuff like that now, okay? We don't need anybody in there editing. But I'll put that part in there.
Depends on who you know.
I did have a meeting with the local newspaper earlier today, and I talked with the newspaper about this matter. And pretty much had to because we had a public transaction that occurred. And so when you have a public transaction occur where you buy a piece of land, people start asking, well, why'd you buy this land? Well, we just bought it. No, I don't operate like that. This is why we bought it. And the reason, and we have a work session coming up with the board to talk about this stuff. So I want people to know that we're very strategic, very intentional. We're not arbitrary. We have a plan. We're not going to throw up a building here, throw up a building there. Oh, we need this building over here. It's going to be, if it's not inside this plan, we need to talk about how to get it inside this plan. And if it fits in the overall plan. But there's not going to be any more, we're going to throw up a set of bathrooms over here or concession stand over there. It will all exist inside of one of these projects, and the associated funding that goes. You see how they were color coded every time? That's how you build projects, and then when you award those projects out, you give them out to companies that have the expertise, they have the manpower, they have the wisdom, they've been in business long enough to carry it out. So we're not stuck on the back end trying to get a certificate of occupancy. So, and I'm not trying to make light of that, but that's how those things occur, folks, okay? And if ever I start operating outside this facility plan, I've got people like Jason Flanders going to say, whoa, wait a minute now, is that in our plan?
Is this financing that you're talking about, or I mean, does this 5-year plan include this sort of sports facility upgrades? You sort of put it as an aside?
It's just kind of an aside right now because I feel like we're that far behind on our deferred maintenance.
Right, the things that have to be done.
Things that have to be done. But we have had those discussions at other levels like softball, wrestling, cheer, track, baseball, and stuff like that. We have had those, and I don't want people to think that we're neglecting them, but I do think we have stuff that's going on in the 8 to 3 o'clock every day that probably needs to be addressed right now. You know, in the last 10 years now, we've put together a fine arts center, we've put together an ag center, and then before, when August 2025, because we'll have a college and career academy, and then soon after that, we'll have stadium renovations and a field house. So we have a diversified amount of projects that have gone on right there, but we haven't done a lot on just the every year type, upkeep type stuff too, which I think we really need to focus back towards that. But we don't need to forget about, you know, items that you really want to. The thing that you got to remember is, if you start improving one sport, especially a male sport, and you don't have associated improvements in the corresponding female sport, then you're begging for things like Office of Civil Rights, Title IX complaints, and those kinds of things to come. So we have to move those projects along at the same rate so that students from all different backgrounds get the benefit from improved facilities as well.
Dr. Finch, I'd say one more thing that, and this is, I know this is getting outside of my scope, but we do see a lot of plans in what we do. When we go to a lot of places and we see a lot of plans, you really do have a really nice opportunity. I mean, the campus concept, now that you have that connecting piece of land, really is interesting and can be a really nice setup for your facilities that a lot of school districts don't have. That's, I mean, it's really
the proximity of
it's
7, 8,
unique
9,
to have
10,
all that
11,
stuff
12.
together, and it's rare that you see a plan that addresses, you know, pre-K through 12th and kind of makes everything fall together. So I know it's ambitious what you're looking at, but it really is I mean, it's good to see a plan that addresses a lot of different spots across the system and also creates a really nice campus concept.
Yeah, so what you're doing in the evaluation.
Let me say this, and I don't, whenever I make reference towards a set of restrooms here, concession stand, I'm not being critical of any past administration or board or anything like that. I am saying that my intent under this administration is to break away from that strategy and move to more of a master plan strategy. But again, I heard that during my campaigning, so to speak, for this job and interviewing for this job. I heard that message loud and clear. So it's something that this board has wanted, And I don't want it to sound like, well, whoever made those plans for those facilities, they stink. That's not what I'm saying, okay? But I am saying that moving forward, we really want to couch any type of facilities that we're putting together in an overall project, not as a standalone effort. Sorry.
That's not good. Be sure you get those remember, the evaluations for the entire day, it's just not our section. It's for the entire day, and I'll get those, and.
You need them before you leave today.
Yes, sir, I do, I sure do.
All right, so this is your ticket out the door.
I've already got a few.
In order for you to get your break from now until the 5:30 board meeting that starts in the auditorium, you gotta get this completed as fast as you can, as thorough, efficient, and accurate, and then make sure that Raymond James gets it back. So don't
I'll get it to Georgia
don't-
leadership. I'll make copies today, send it to Georgia leadership, and they'll make sure your training is documented and all that stuff. I've got to get one of them.
Don't be Christmas tree in this thing now.
Yes, sir, that's not a question.
On that bond millage.
Yes, sir.
That goes before the voters. You set that based on like 1%, 2%, or.
Well, a lot of times, you could set it at, we would advise, we look at the value of your meal. The value of your meal is, what, 1.6?
It's 1.8, it's 1.8 right now.
1.8,
Trending
okay.
toward 1.8.
1.8, so you could set it at, you would probably have to set it right now by the,
You tell the voters your expectations.
Yeah.
Right. We're gonna levy $1 million.
no, sir, once it's,
It's in perpetuity.
until you have to stop it, that's the goal line. It's not easy. Okay, I don't want you to think I take it easy. That's the thing. Once you-
But schools y'all showed that had like 15 year, 30 year, 20 year, those look like they had time limits on them.
Well, what happened was there was a time limit on.
That's not a bond
On the
millage.
bond, that wasn't a bond millage.
But there are,
Okay.
Alan, but I would add, there are places like Paulding, whose sales tax grew enough where they have rolled that bond millage off completely. That went on in 2008, it was gone by 2015.
Better roll the bond millage off or roll a different millage?
Well, it's your choice. I would keep the bond millage because it's giving you capital dollars. But like Paulding's bringing in enough and they caught up with their growth. We're levying the bond millage and now their sales tax pays 100% of the bond again. But they just had a period of time, like that little quarter we were trying to work around, said, well, we're gonna start here, and then if we slow down and grow, but the sales tax grows enough, we don't have to continue the full term levy.
But you could just decide to cut your revenue.
You don't, that's exactly right. You cut your regular meal, not do a bond millage, but the only negative caveat of that is when you do your hearings. When you do your taxpayer hearings, then if you don't do your rollback, then you just, that's the only negative aspect. But I'm not saying that doesn't outweigh doing the bond millage. I'm not saying, you know what I'm saying, the cost.
But the bond millage is voted on by the public, where our revenue millage is decided by us.
Right.
So a bond millage is limited to what it can do.
Yes, sir, it can only go, so bond millage,